Chris. Yeah.
Because I'm trying to get away from it rather than.
Yeah. Jeez, eh?
Hey, Jill. How are you? Yes. Um, did it show my calendar look good? Yeah. Okay, that's fine. It's always up to date. I've asked someone to draft up an email for me to send, so I'll send it to you before I send it, though. Just because we've been doing a bit of work on it.
Yeah, I'm good. I got all your stuff. No, that's fine. I mean, I think that there's not going to be a motion about the like
I'll be
but
here
I
all
think
week.
some plans are going to speak to it, kind of in favor, so it might arise. So I actually, is Doug coming? Do you know? Okay, because I printed off some stuff from him. If it's technical about how a mandate gets, like I don't think we should answer that because it's an SSHA thing. I hope not, but yeah, that would be good because we don't want to go there. Oh, and Chris, sorry, I also spoke to you this morning, so he's kind of involved in that too. We're all good.
Thanks. How you doing?
Fine.
Yeah.
What you been up to?
Huh?
What you been up to?
Juggling a lot of things.
Seriously,
You know?
it's crazy
like
times.
it does not slow down. I've been here.
I cannot wait until council is done. Did you see Peter last week? Did you hear about it? It was a zoo. They didn't have quorum. Greg. Oh, I'm not sitting here. You guys can. No, I'm just talking to Rob. They didn't have quorum, so they had to reconvene at 1:30. And then they just had quorum. And until they dealt with his issue, he kept leaving and coming back and leaving. And then Peruzza was so intense. He was running all around and banging on the microphone. It was just meditative. So no good public policy is getting done in that forum.
Two together move.
I can move.
Can you?
Yeah, I'm not going to be on for quite a while.
Would Pam mind if I slid Pam over?
I'm sure she may not even know it. It looks like someone else has set that up for her.
That's her stuff. I don't
Can I
know.
slide her?
Slide her.
Pam.
Just
Where is she?
Yeah, slide her down. I don't know who this is though.
slide her down. Blame it on me. How are you?
She's here for Mike.
Is she?
Yeah.
Mike.
Mike's
Well, once it gets going, I
Mike's in
expect
Japan,
a few
right?
people may clear out, and then we're good. But let the fun begin.
Always, eh?
Want some fun?
No, thanks.
No?
No, you know what I do with glasses of water. Oh, this microphone.
Check, check, check. 1, 2. 2, 2, 2, 2. Check, check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. It's on, I think, but it's just not. There we are. Good morning, everybody. Before I proceed with the more formal scripting of the beginning of the meeting to call it to order, may I acknowledge here the presence of a new member of the Executive Committee, and by virtue of the stepping aside of Denzel Menon Wong as statutory Deputy Mayor during the period of the provincial election, we asked Stephen Holliday to assume that position, and that, for better or for worse, in his case, gives him a seat on the Executive Committee. When I say for better or for worse, in terms of his own well-being. But he's here now, and we welcome him here, and we're happy to have him here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an honor and a privilege, and I really look forward to continuing to work collegially with yourself and the members of this committee and the council at large to do great things in this city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Is this the first time that we've had a father and son who've actually been...
You know, it's funny, I made mention of that to him, and I sent a note to his father, too, to say that I suspect it probably is. I can't think of a previous instance in which it has happened. And father and son both as deputy mayors of the city, and so that's interesting to note as well. So we do have a quorum, and I will call the 34th meeting of the Executive Committee to order and welcome all members of the committee, including our newest member, as well as members of council who are here with us to take part in our proceedings today, and members of the public who are here as well, and of course the media. And I'll begin, as we do, by acknowledging that we're meeting today on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and home to many diverse Indigenous peoples. People can watch us, even people who might have to leave the room for some period of time today, on YouTube at Toronto City Council Live, or follow the meeting on your computer, your tablet, or your smartphone at www.toronto.ca/council. Now, at the outset, may I ask if there are any declarations under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, and if there is one that you have or more, please indicate the item number and the nature of the interest. All right, I see no declarations for today. May I have a motion to confirm the minutes of the Executive Committee meeting of April 17th, 2018? Moved by Councillor Ainsley, Councillor McMahon. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Now, we have quite a lengthy agenda in front of us today, including some very significant items. We have, and I'm very happy to say, we have many members of the community here who want to speak. And in order to make sure that everyone has a chance to be heard in a reasonable time, I would propose the following be the rules that apply for this committee meeting, and maybe the clerk could display the motion. It is one that we've used before in order to make sure people can be heard in a reasonable time. And you can see there, item 1 talks about registration for deputants until 10:30 today. Secondly, that public presentations be limited to 3 minutes. Thirdly, that questions of speakers by members of council, including members of the committee, be limited to 3 minutes, 1 round. Fourthly, that questions to staff be limited to 3 minutes. And finally, that speaking times for members of City Council be limited to 3 minutes. And I think this is something we've done when we've had a large number, as we do today, in excess of 40 deputations, to make sure everybody gets heard in a reasonable manner. So I would be moving that and ask I'll call the question on that. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. So let's proceed then with a rundown of the agenda. And if you want to hold an item, of course, if you could just speak up and say hold. And of course, with items that have deputants, I'll hold these items in my name. And so, item 34.1, Eglinton East Light Rail is being held for deputations. Item 34.2, Toronto Senior Strategy version 2.0 being held for deputations. Item 34.3, implementing Tenants First Seniors Housing Unit at TCHC being held for deputations. Item 34.4, Councillor Shiner wants to hold, and if I could ask your concurrence, just so we can make a note of it at the same time, we would like to schedule it because of some conflicts that Councillor Shiner has for around 4 o'clock this afternoon. We can proceed with the rest of the agenda. The only chance you're taking, Councillor Shiner, is we're done by 4 o'clock, but I'm not counting on that necessarily.
If that's the case, that would be tremendous.
All right. Item 34.5, Scarborough Waterfront Project. It's the biggest group of deputants, so we have a presentation and deputations will hold that. Item 34.6, response times and service levels for various city divisions.
Councillor Ainsley, can I hold that, please?
Being held. Okay, being held by Councillor Ainsley. Item 34.7, 2016 Annual Human Rights Office Report. Suggested disposition is to accept the recommendation in the report. Moved by Councillor McMahon, seconded by Councillor Pasternak. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 34.8, filling of senior level staff vacancies. A recommendation the Executive Committee receive the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Equity responsive budgeting being held for deputations. Item 34.9. 34.10, supporting equity goals with disaggregated data. I believe Councillor Ainsley will want to hold that. Item 34.11, report on outstanding matters related to the city's accountability offices. Recommendation to accept the recommendations found in the report. Moved by Councillor McMahon. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 34.12, the Toronto Pan Am Sports Centre Annual General Meeting and 2017 financial statements. And the recommendation is that recommendations of the city manager and chief financial officer be accepted. All those in favor? Councillor Ainsley. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 34.13, home dialysis water rebate program.
Can I hold that, please?
Held by Councillor Ainsley. Excuse me. Item 34.14, replenishment of funding for school lands property acquisition.
Can I hold that too?
Held by Councillor Ainsley. Item 34.15, new affordable rental homes at John and King and in Weston Community Cultural Hub. That's in the Weston Community Hub. Moved by Councillor Bylaw. All those in favor? I'm sorry? Oh, I didn't flip the page. You're quite right. There are deputations. My apologies. Item 34.16, suicide prevention through bridge modification. The recommendation from the Medical Officer of Health to receive the report for information. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 34.17, donation from Spin Master to Shelter Support and Housing and TCHC.
Sorry, Mayor Tory, can I just speak to that quickly and then?
Sure.
Sorry,
and then just like a quick, in effect, a quick release?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I just wanted to congratulate Spin Master. I don't know if many people are aware, but they also support a program called the Caring and Sharing Banquet, which is a Deliberty Grand every year. They donate toys to needy schools, children throughout the GTA in support of the Breakfast Club program. What they do, if a school goes to this banquet, each child is given a toy, and then they can pick a toy for a needy friend that wasn't there or that lives in their neighborhood. So when you look at this report, and it's a donation of 6,000 toys, close to $100,000, and they approached the city's partnership office, the Caring and Sharing Banquet, which just had its 7th event at Christmas. They donate close to this equivalent every year. So I just want to acknowledge Spin Master. They've given toys to a number of schools in my area over the years, supporting the Children's Breakfast Club, which I think is a very neat, important endeavor, and I think it really shows their commitment to the city, and I'll be supporting the recommendations.
Thank you. I might ask you that you move it, if you would, Councillor Ainsley. Just to say as well, they are excellent corporate citizens and a huge success story for Toronto, and that it started from scratch, and they employ hundreds of people now here at one of the world's leading toy manufacturers. So moved by Councillor Ainsley that we receive the report with gratitude, because these reports are very mechanical and dry, and just saying we have to do what we have to do to accept the gift. But
maybe a key to the city.
Moved by Councillor Ainsley. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 34.18. Facilities 2018 capital budget adjustments and accelerations coming from the Budget Committee, and is that moved by Councillor Crawford? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 34.19, project cost adjustments to the Parks, Forestry and Recreation 2018 capital budget. Again, Councillor Crawford moves that. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 34.20 is being held for deputations, the City of Toronto's Indigenous Cultural Competency Training. 34.21, refining eligibility criteria for creative co-location facilities, subclasses. And there's a recommendation that has been made here by the General Manager, Economic Development Culture, moved by Councillor Thompson. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 34.22, Parks, Forestry and Recreation Facilities Master Plan, implications for school boards. And this is a letter coming from the City School Boards Advisory Committee with recommendations coming from the committee. Do I have a mover for that? Moved by Deputy Mayor Holliday. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 34.23, planning childcare in schools, consultation with school boards, again coming from the City School Boards Advisory Committee, that we should accept their recommendation to consult with the school boards. A mover, Councillor Pasternak. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 34.24, final progress report, City School Boards Advisory Committee staff work plan. Again, a letter from the board forwarding the plan and asking we forward it to the school boards in Toronto. A mover for that, Councillor Pasternak again. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 34.25, the 2018 election accessibility plan is being held for deputations. Item 34.26, coming again from the Accessibility Advisory Committee, comments and recommendations on the Bloor Street bike lane, Shaw to Avenue Road.
I would like to move the recommendations from the committee.
Moving the recommendations for the committee, Councillor Shiner. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 34.27, accessibility at construction sites. Again, a letter coming from the Accessibility Advisory Committee asking for the transportation services to review. Moved by Councillor Shiner. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The sidewalk cafe items, again coming from the Accessibility Advisory Committee, 34.28 being held for deputations. 34.29, accessibility during construction, Eglinton Crosstown Light Rail Transit being held for deputations. Item 34.30, Wheel-Trans appeals process. There is a letter here again from the Accessibility Advisory Committee requesting TTC to make a presentation to the Advisory Committee. Moved by Councillor Pasternak. You want to hold that?
Yes. And if there's someone here from the TTC, I'd like to speak to them.
All right, so Councillor Shiner's holding that, and it'll be a little later, so we can have somebody here from the TTC on that item, which is 34.30.
Mayor Tory, I can talk to them. Mayor Tory?
Where was I? 34.30.
If they contact me, I can talk to them offline.
All right, so if somebody from the TTC wants to be in touch with Councillor Shiner, we may get the questions answered and release it later. 34.31, amendment to the Municipal Code, Chapter 223, remuneration for council members being held for deputations. 34.32, accountability and transparency in transit planning. Motion here concerning an inquiry being held for deputations.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
This particular one here, I wonder, I'd like to move this item, I'd like to move deferral. In fact, I'd like to move it sine die, this particular item here. It appears to me that, you know, city staff's integrity is being impugned by this particular request. It also appears to me that our professional staff have provided advice to us, which is obviously something that we rely on an ongoing basis, and this seeks to impugn that as well. It also further appears to me, based on the information that I've been looking at, is that the Auditor General has in fact reviewed and investigated this particular matter and has found that staff are actually doing their job. And so I find it rather offensive with respect to this request here. It also seems to me that we have dealt with this for more than 10 times here at this committee or council. Furthermore, I don't want to see this executive committee being used as a platform, because when I look at this and they talk about the judicial inquiry, the computer leasing inquiry, I see nothing in similar. I was a staff member at that particular point in time, and if there was something similar, I think we'd all be saying that this is something that we'd want further information to come forward and so on. So I see nothing relating to that as it's used as an example. And so for that reason, I want to move this particular item and basically defer it sine die.
All right. It's been moved that we defer the sine die, and we'll call the question on that. Moved by Councillor Thompson. All those in favor? Recorded vote. All those in favor?
There were speakers.
And we've asked for a recorded vote, so.
All those in favor of deferral indefinitely? Councillor Ainsley, Councillor Balau, Councillor Burnside.
We're just in the middle of a vote, but we'll...
Councillor Crawford, Councillor DiGiorgio, Councillor McMahon, Deputy Mayor Holliday, Mayor Tory, Councillor Pasternak, Councillor Shiner, and Councillor Thompson. Motion is moved unanimously.
Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. So that completes the rundown of the agenda, and so it brings us back to item 34.1, And there are deputants on item 34.1, which is the Eglinton East Light Rail Transit Project update and next steps. And the first, there are 3 deputants, so they can just be ready in order: Sarah Clemenhaga, Moya Bial, and Cheryl Lewis Thurab. And so, Ms. Clemenhaga, if you want to come forward first. So welcome, and you know that we just passed this motion to have excuse me. There's this hubbub in the room, and we have a deputant wanting to be heard here. And so 3 minutes, and then I'm sure there may be some questions. Welcome.
Thank you. I won't take up much of your time. I'm just here to support the report on the Eglinton East LRT, to support the extension to Malvern, and to support moving forward on the Eglinton East LRT. Just to note that the project has only been funded, from what I understand, to 5% design. So I just want to urge this committee and council as a whole to make this Eglinton East LRT project a funding priority. It will...
Excuse me, I apologize to you for this, but over on this side of the room, and including in the back corner there, please. Ladies and gentlemen, in the back corner, over here. If there's going to be a meeting, could you please take it outside? We have somebody who's taken the trouble to come here today to be heard from, and I would ask that people try and listen to the deputation. I apologize. Please go ahead.
That's okay. I've been to meetings before. I know this happens. Just to say again, Eglinton East LRT has broad support, I think, from staff, from council, from residents in Scarborough and around the city. It will provide rapid transit for people within walking distance for thousands of residents. And it's good for transit within Scarborough as well as outside of the area. So I just believe that the Eglinton East LRT should be a funding priority when it comes to transit in Scarborough. So that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Just in case there's some questions, are there questions of the deputant from members visiting from not on the committee or members of the committee? Okay, well, thank you very much for coming today. Moya Bial. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Moya Bial. I'm a resident in Scarborough. I've been a resident for more than 25 years. I'm a frequent rider on the TTC, and I'm a volunteer with Scarborough Transit Action. And I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you today. My purpose in coming here is to urge you to get Scarborough moving and to build the Eglinton East LRT now. I'm asking you to make it the priority instead of the Scarborough subway extension. I'm asking you to shelve the one-stop subway extension and devote the budget to building the nearly shovel-ready rapid transit LRT network in Scarborough. Let evidence be your guide. When Mayor Tory proposed the so-called optimized solution of moving from a 3-stop to a 1-stop extension, the savings were supposed to pay for the construction of the Eglinton East LRT. But the cost of the 1-stop subway has ballooned to such an extent that it has consumed most of the budget that the city had set aside for the project. The cost of the subway extension is widely expected to grow even further when the 30% design stage is reached. The Eglinton East LRT is not funded, even though more than 41,000 residents, more than half of whom live in priority neighborhoods, would be in walking distance to rapid transit. The mayor and most councillors have decided that they are not a priority. And even though it could be built more quickly than the one-stop subway and would bring more jobs and development than the one-stop subway, the mayor and most councillors have decided that the Eglinton East LRT can wait indefinitely. The subway extension has been dogged by the lack of evidence that supports it from the get-go, and yet it is still the mayor's priority for Scarborough instead of the LRT network. But the Eglinton East LRT is the one thing that everyone agrees on. Why? Because unlike the subway extension, the evidence for it is solid. The issue of evidence-based decision-making is why Councillor Matlow's motion for a judicial inquiry into the information that has been provided to Council about the subway extension is so important. There isn't a shred of solid evidence in favor of the subway extension. The mayor and most councillors' refusal to acknowledge the evidence has failed Scarborough. If it weren't for your stubborn refusal to be guided by evidence, people in Scarborough would today be well on their way to riding an LRT higher order rapid transit network. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Beal. Questions of the deputant? Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate your time. Next, we have Cheryl Lewis-Thurab. Is Ms. Lewis-Thurab here? Cheryl Lewis-Thurab? Okay, that is the list of deputants that we have here, and so we would then move next to questions of staff. And are there questions of staff from members of council that are here with us today, members of council not on the committee? Okay, questions of staff from Councillor Davis.
So I guess I'm wondering how the city intends to finance this project.
Through the chair, this transit project has been included in the DC bylaw review, so it is part of that exercise, and that would cover a portion of the costs as well. Council identified the Eglinton East LRT as one of its funding priorities for the next round of federal infrastructure funding, and so that will also cover a portion. Until we have the full costs, we're not able to develop a full funding strategy yet.
And when will we know whether or not there's funding in the next round of infrastructure money?
Through the chair, my understanding is that that we already have a notional amount committed by the federal government of $4.8 billion for transit projects in the Toronto area, in Toronto. Part of what the city manager's office is doing is negotiating with the province about the allocation of those funds, and also waiting on the approach from the federal government to the application process to confirm what projects are going forward.
So we went ahead and decided on a funding scheme for the one-stop subway long before we had the final cost. In fact, we don't have the final cost yet. Still, we're financing, and we started financing it years ago. So do we have plans to start financing this from a city perspective?
Through the chair.
Are we going to start putting city money into this, I guess is what I'm asking.
Through the chair, at this point, we are seeking direction from executive committee and then council on a few items in order to be able to develop the plan for this LRT line more fully, and in order to be able to bring a better cost estimate to council. At that point, we will also need to indicate the manner in which we propose to cover the costs.
And when is that? When will you be? At what percentage, and when will that be?
So in the first quarter of 2019, we have been asked by council to report back on the more detailed up to 5% design of the line and an updated cost estimate for the project, along with an updated business case that would present the case for the line.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions of staff from any members of council that are with us? Councillor Thompson, if we move to the committee now then. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff. I wanted to understand, because this is an important aspect with respect to whether or not it's transit, bridges, or any other types of things, capital work that's being done in the city. With respect to the question that's been asked around funding, does the funding amount comes first before the actual plan, let's say, for the installation of whether or not it's a subway development or streetcar acquisition? which comes first? Do you actually have a plan first and you sort of sort out the details in terms of the financial information? And is this unique to us here in Toronto?
Through you, Mr. Chair, with respect to large projects, like the scale of subway in relation to other infrastructure projects, no, it is not uncommon for certain monies to be invested so we can do further work, and that's what you're doing here.
Right.
You're making an initial investment for us to complete a number of assessments and then bring back to committee and council what are the true costs, what are the implications. So this happens in many projects. We start with the environmental assessment, we work through a conceptual design, come back each time with different costing, finally bring forward a final design with better costing. For example, water projects may take 6, 7, 8 years worth of environmental assessment, conceptual design before we know the hard number and put it in our budget.
So this is not unique, this is the norm, would you say?
It is very normal to bring back various reports and improve our cost estimates along the way.
Right. Are we signing any contracts to commit ourselves prior to actually finding or having the money in place on the advancement of the LRT or the subway as such? Are we signing any actual agreement to say?
Mr. Chair, no, there is no,
that's
commitment to construction at this stage. This is all about investigation.
A number of years ago, under then Mayor David Miller, I recall we actually had a meeting, and it was off-site because I think there was a strike at the time, and we didn't want to hold a meeting at City Hall in order that we didn't cross any picket lines and so on. But we actually bought and decided that we would buy, commit ourselves to $1 billion to buy streetcars. Or were you aware of that?
Through Mr. Chair, yes, I was around at the time and I remember that.
Right, and so you were there at that time. And at that time, when we committed ourselves to a contract to spend $1 billion, did we actually have the funding in place?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, at that time we did not. We needed to work on the financing strategy.
Were we able to subsequently acquire and purchase those streetcars after we had signed an agreement with Bombardier where we didn't have the funding in place or a funding formula? And did we successfully acquire those streetcars?
Through Mr. Chair, we successfully signed a contract to acquire, and we're in the process of receiving that acquisition.
Okay, so I'm hearing a lot. Last question. Yeah, so I'm hearing. Well, I've got. Oh, that's 3 minutes. I'm sorry. Right. Just to hear a lot of questions about this. Where is the money coming from, and so on. What exactly is your response to that when you give an answer to either a member of council or staff? What is exactly your response? Because I'm not quite sure.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the advice that I would give you is once we have a construction contract that we have to enter into, that we then have a clear financing plan, which include successive steps, especially if there's multi-phases to a project. You can actually identify over the years how you're going to finance something. So as an example, large water projects, we award contracts based on our knowledge that future revenues will cover that. Right. And we may have to make adjustments in those subsequent years in order to match our projects. But before you make that commitment, you then have to allocate that money. That would be at construction stage.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Other members of the committee wishing to ask questions on this? I just have a couple, if I might, to staff. First of all, I heard mentioned earlier, and I just want to confirm, make sure this is confirmed on the record. We, at our previous meeting, I think, of City Council and of this committee, approved a new development charges bylaw that's going to go forward. And can I just confirm with staff that this particular project, the Eglinton East LRT, is one that was specifically listed as part of the justification for the development charge increases, and that this project could be funded in part by some of the proceeds of that development charge increase going forward? And I think you might just confirm for me as well, the net expected amount of money coming back to the city is something in the order of $200 million a year from that, and that that funding could be eligible in part for part of the financing of Eglinton East LRT. Is that true?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the project is included in the development charges bylaw. I'm afraid I don't have the answer right here in terms of what that dollar value would be, but yes, there would be funds available to support.
All right. Can you also confirm for me that of the $9 billion, I think you mentioned in a previous answer just under $5 billion coming from the federal government. There's also been a sum of, I believe, of $4 billion coming from the province, and that $9 billion is being allocated to the City of Toronto for a priority list of projects, of which the Eglinton East LRT is one. And therefore, a portion of that $9 billion could be attributed to the Eglinton East LRT when we make those allocations.
Yes, that is correct.
And is it also true to say that on that list of priority projects that are covered by the $9 billion put forward by the two governments, that there are different timetables for those projects, all of which I'm proud to say are moving ahead in one stage or another, but that, for example, the relief line, which will also receive some funding, is already receiving some funding from those federal and provincial pools of money, that has a longer timeline, and that the 10-year timeline of the existing PTIF Phase 2 money would make it quite likely that you would cover a portion of the Eglinton East LRT with that money, because some of the other projects will have a longer cycle and will be covered initially, but will get further allocations of money. In other words, this project will come sooner, and the money will be expended and invested sooner, and that some of that $9 billion will end up going to, in all likelihood, the Eglinton East LRT.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. As we have a clearer sense of both the application process and also the more detailed costing on all of these projects, we will need to set out a schedule, and the work on some of them will go beyond the period of this next round of federal funding we expect.
And just to really, I guess it's to reiterate your own advice, meaning the staff, professional staff to us, that is it fair to say that, first of all, because we have the money available from Phase 1 of the federal money, that allows us to pay for the planning and design work we're authorizing to look at the extension to Malvern and pay for it and do the work now, and that's true? Is that true?
That is correct. We have the allocation from Council that includes some from the first round of PTIF funding, and that will cover the cost to take us to 5% design and develop the business case and fuller costing estimate.
And I believe it's true to say as well that in your, I'm sorry, I'll leave the last question. In your material provided in support of this recommendation, that you also indicated it would be sort of sensible to do all the planning at once to be able to present this to Council as one project which goes all the way from Kennedy to Malvern, one project in the sense we could then consider the whole thing regardless of how we decided to time it, and that you could do that planning now as a matter of common sense more so than whether there was money available?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. We think it makes sense to do that additional planning at this stage, particularly the stretch up to Malvern.
Thank you very much. Anybody else with questions of staff? Okay, well then I think we can move to speakers, and are there members of the City Council visiting with us that wish to speak? Do I see Councillor de Beermaker with his hand? Deputy Mayor de Beermaker, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just came in today to give this my full-hearted support, and I hope that this will get approved unanimously here at Executive Committee and unanimously at the full Council. When I look back at I'll call it since the megacity began, under the Mel Lastman, I can't recall any expansion plans for transit in Scarborough. Under the David Miller government of 7 years, I don't remember any money being approved by our council for transit expansion in Scarborough. The provincial government was very nice to us with the Eglinton Crosstown, which, although 80% of it is not in Scarborough, some does go crosses the border into Scarborough, and we're very grateful for that. And under the Ford administration, we were able to pass a tax increase to make sure that the Scarborough subway is fully funded, 100% funded. So I look at the LRT project today. This means that we are investing, and we actually have approved under this administration the Smart Track stations and the Smart Track plan, which will give an incredible improvement of service for anyone living in Scarborough and help them to get downtown or to the Kennedy subway or wherever they want to go in Scarborough a lot faster. So we've got the Smart Track program fully funded in Scarborough. We've got the subway extension fully funded. We have improved bus service fully funded in Scarborough, a 33% increase in the operating budget of the TTC, which includes Scarborough as well. So we have more Wheel-Trans, more Night Express, more express buses, and more buses on every major street in Scarborough. So I think right now, Mr. Mayor, we're spending more money in Scarborough than we ever have in the history of Scarborough and certainly in the history of the megacity. And I'm glad we're finally getting it. And I think if somebody says, well, why are we spending so much money in Scarborough? The answer is because Scarborough is vast. It's a third of our geographic area. It's 25% of our population. And it has the least amount of transit service of our entire city. North York and Scarborough were about the same population. We're about the same size. North York has 17 subway stations. Scarborough has 3. So there has been a historic imbalance from the perspective of the folks in the east. I look at our subway station, for example, it's going to have 70,000 people a day going through those turnstiles. I've got a list here of stations, including things like Summerhill, that has 6,000 people a day using the station. Rosedale of 6,000 people a day using the stations. And I fully support us providing transit service to those downtown residents. If you live in Rosedale, you live in Summerhill, you live in any of the stations, you live on Jane at 20,000, you live on Queen or King, we need a system that connects everybody and gives them all the options to go anywhere they want in the city to make the city healthy and vibrant. So to finally come out to the east end of the city that's been perhaps historically neglected for whatever reasons, and invest in Smart Track, a subway system, and an LRT system that won't have the LRT dead end at the Kennedy subway station, meaning it's not really accessible to 85–90% of the population in Scarborough, that it will actually go to the very end of Eglinton, up Kingston, up Morningside, up to Malvern Mall. That will mean if we do this on our watch, we will have done good for the city of Scarborough and bring the vibrancy, the jobs, and the ability to travel that everybody else in the city enjoys. So I hope we'll all support it 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Other members of council that are not members of the committee wishing to speak? Okay, well then we're ready to move to members of the committee, and we have Councillor Thompson to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I too want to lend my support to the item in front of us. I had this week 2 community town hall meetings, and I probably had probably about 120, 130 people at the town hall. One of the central things that we talked about was transit and transportation for Scarborough, because people realize how important this is. We talked about the subway Bloor-Danforth expansion to the Scarborough Town Centre. There were a number of people from my ward who had been following the news and had said, well, you know, we're hearing that it's a very expensive proposition in terms of advancing the Bloor-Danforth subway to the Scarborough Town Centre. And I proceeded to explain to the residents as to why it was important, what are some of the things that we're actually looking for. We have in the Scarborough Town Centre area a number, which Councillor DeBeermaker and I essentially share. We have a number of condo developments that are on the go. At Midland and Lawrence, we have probably about 4,000 units coming in. In addition, we had a gentleman who came to the meeting, and he is looking to for space, about 200 or so, or 250,000 square feet of space. And he said to me, you know, if you guys don't build better transit in Scarborough, the jobs are not going to come. And I've heard that time and time again. Finally, some attention is being made in terms of addressing this issue. In 2005, I think it was, when I was the chair of Scarborough Community Councillor, I brought in Mitch Stambler and I said, is there a transit plan for Scarborough? And he said, no, Councillor, it's just a general transit plan for the City of Toronto. And I said, well, you know, Scarborough's been left behind for a long time, and we missed the boat probably 35 years ago when we didn't want the expansion of the subway then. We took the then whatever the UDDS transit system that was being built was going to be innovative and so on. We learned that that was the only system that was built. It's a system that we've had to deal with now for many, many years. And so I think for many of us in Scarborough, we're no longer going to accept this notion that everyone else knows better what we need, and in fact, we should not have an expanded subway system. The fact of the matter is that certainly I want more stops, and I would want to see the costs at a, you know, affordable number, whatever that means, quite frankly, because I don't know the details at this particular point in time. Information is still coming forward. But if I say this, with respect to this plan that's in front of us, we need to move on with this LRT expansion. But with respect to the subway advancement, if we don't build it now, we will never build it. And the reason why we'll never build it, because it will never be any cheaper. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. I had Councillor Ainsley to speak.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. I'm going to be supporting the recommendations in this, and mainly I'm going to speak about the Eglinton East LRT extension from Kennedy to UTSC. Years ago, when former Mayor Miller had his transit plan and he looked at building an LRT system up into at least University of Toronto Scarborough, we created an amazing partnership with the University of Toronto Scarborough and University of Toronto for the creation of the Pan Am Centre. And in the report that we just approved, the Pan Am Centre is doing amazing. It has the highest amount of revenue in its history. It has the highest number of gate attendees. But there was a partnership at that time, and the partnership was U of T students would agree to build and help fund the Pan Am Centre in partnership with the City of Toronto if we built an LRT to that campus. You know, it's been a long time coming. If I look at the Transit City LRT version that was originally looked at, and it was how we can get people from point B to point B without putting a lot of concern in between. I was at a number of town halls in my community where residents raised issues about the bottleneck of traffic at Kingston Road and Morningside, Kingston Road and Lawrence area, and how that is going to be dealt with. While we're looking, we have a solution for that. We had a town hall meeting a couple of months ago. They raised again, and TTC staff said that they would deal with that. At the University of Toronto Scarborough, it's actually on the east side of a ravine. There was talk of tunneling through that area, and a number of different options. The proposal that's before us today at grade, I think it respects what the University of Toronto needs. It respects what residents in this area need. This line is going to go through 5 neighborhood improvement areas, which I think is very important. You know, people want jobs in that area. They want to be able to get quickly to jobs. I've had developers, when this was brought up a couple of years ago, came to my office and said, how quickly is this going to be done? We own property on Kingston Road. We want to develop property. Having an LRT go through that area increases the value of our property. We want to be part of that neighborhood. One of the other transit components of this is integrating transit in the city of Scarborough. We have another item on this agenda talking about our aging population. Well, there's a bus rapid transit line along Ellesmere that's going to run from the Scarborough Transit, from the Scarborough Town Centre to the Oshawa Centre. I think that's going to be key in getting people across Scarborough into Durham. I've been working on a pilot project for 7 to 8 years. And, you know, once again, that's key to the seniors and the older people in my area. When it's really hot or really cold, trying to get out to many of the bus lines that only run east-west. Being able to have a community bus connecting with the LRT, the BRT, I think is going to bring huge changes to Eastern Scarborough. I know when you were running for office a couple of years ago, I'll mention this again, there was a mosque that we opened. The man said it took him almost 2 hours to get from Port Union and Kingston Road to transit to get to his work. And I think this line, having this built, all the connections are going to be very important to Scarborough, and I look forward to seeing it built. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ainsley. Ladies and gentlemen, with your concurrence, and I think we have to look at this on a case-by-case basis, I think we do, there is the third of only 3 deputants on this matter just arrived and was a bit late, and I proposed to hear her because, you know, there were only 3, and so if I could ask Cheryl Lewis-Thurab to come forward, we could revert with your concurrence to deputations for the 3 minutes and any questions, and then go back to the speakers. Good morning. We have 3 minutes allocated for your comments this morning, and so please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Mayor John Tory and members of the Executive Council. My name is Cheryl Lewis-Thurab, and I am here today to speak in favor of an independent judicial inquiry into the one-stop Scarborough subway extension.
You're down actually to speak to the Eglinton East LRT. The matter of that proposed inquiry was already dealt with and deferred indefinitely by the committee. So you're down as speaking to the Eglinton East LRT, which is the matter that we're on right now. And so, are your comments devoted to that at all, or were you on this matter of the other thing you mentioned?
Well, I might have been misguided, but no, I am not down to speak on the Eglinton LRT. So,
Okay, well, that, for whatever reason, that's the matter that you were listed as deputing on. You're not listed as deputing on the other item in any event, and it's now been deferred indefinitely, so it won't be dealt with here today. And so I apologize to you because somehow there was a mix-up in what you were listed as deputing on, and it also means we wouldn't revert to deputations again to hear you if it's not on this matter that we're presently speaking about.
okay, so I totally understand, and for that I apologize. I don't wish to waste council's time.
Yeah, we took a decision on that other matter already just while you weren't here, and so that's why you wouldn't have known that. And also, it's just our recording of what you registered to speak on was this matter, that's the Eglinton East LRT.
Right, so my campaign manager registered me, so there might have been some mix-up, so I do apologize. I am running for council in Ward 45.
Okay.
So I do appreciate your indulgence.
If you wanted to make any comments, and I'm sorry I've used a bit of your time telling you this, but if you do you want to make any comments on the Eglinton East LRT, I have to ask you to make your comments on that if you wish to do so, and if not, we'll have to thank you. And
I will defer my comments, but thank you very much.
all right, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I'm sorry. I apologize for all the confusion.
And I do too. And I just want to say that I apologize for being late, but again, I
No
was
problem.
by the TTC.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you very much, ma'am. Okay, back to the speakers. I had Councillor Ainsley had spoken, and thank you for that. Are there other speakers? I want to say some words, but if there are others who, Councillor Shiner.
Just briefly, Mayor Tory, that I am completely supportive of this project, but I just wanted to echo the words of my colleague, Councillor Thompson, and I'm sure my other colleagues in Scarborough that are desperate for better public transit out in Scarborough. They're desperate for the subway. They're desperate for the Shepherd subway extension. They're desperate for the LRT. If you live in Scarborough and you try to get into the center of the city, you probably feel like you're living in the 905.
Yep.
Because it's that hard to get in and that much transit that's lacking. And it's far too long that we haven't thought of the city as a whole, and the fact that people around the entire city have to get from place to place, and we'd like them to go by public transit. So this is a great project. I think it should move forward. My colleague was showing me 3 motions that we had looking at the extension of the Shepherd subway that haven't come up. I say it because it rests with the city manager's office, who's here, and I hope that we'll give her a copy of the previous motions, and you can find out where those studies are at as well, because Toronto is a whole. Downtown is the center for some people, but not for all. We all go off to different parts of the city, and just think of what it's like to grab a bus in the far east corner of Finch and Kennedy and try and go somewhere in the city. Not just at rush hour, which traffic doesn't move, but any other time. So these projects are much needed. Every single project that we have on the books is needed, whether it's the relief line, whether it's a Shepherd subway, whether it's the LRT plans. They're desperately needed with the influx of people to the city and how difficult it is now to get around the city by car and by public transit. So moving this forward now, I think, is something that's simply telling our colleagues in Scarborough as a whole, we're there for you, we care about you, and we are supporting your projects. And that's why I spoke here today.
Thanks, Councillor Shiner. Any other speakers? Well, if not, I'll just reset the clock and simply say this. This is a report that I think very wisely, and you heard the staff confirm, that it is meant to accelerate, in a small way, but accelerate nonetheless, the work on the Eglinton East LRT, which, I remind members of council, is a project that is on our identified priority list of projects which we submitted to the other governments for their funding. And there's just been the slightest tone, a little bit, that's come into some of the discussions today on this that sort of says we should be finding one more reason perhaps not to do this acceleration because, for example, well, I mean, there are some people out there who just plain disagree with project. We always find reasons not to do things in the city, and there are some who just plain disagree. And so this morning we had people who are prepared to use any means to put roadblocks in the way of transportation approved by the City Council, by a majority of the City Council, including roadblocks that would throw our professional public servants under the bus. And then we have people saying, well, there's no money yet formally allocated for this project. Therefore, somehow that should slow down doing this additional planning work to take this up to Melbourne. And I would point out that we have right now a situation where we've got $9 billion from the other governments, which we did not have at the beginning of this administration. And furthermore, we have something even better, I think, which is in the middle of a provincial election campaign, we have parties literally flocking to want to fund some of the projects that have been talked about around this building for years, for decades, and not a penny was put into them, no work was done. And we have party leaders flocking to say, I want to give even more to those projects. So to me, the notion that there's no money formally allocated, and we heard Councillor Thompson's very excellent comments about the past and where we said previous councils prior to my time here wanted to proceed ahead with projects, and you went and got the money when you could do so. But then, even on that argument, it's not so, because there's the other argument that was being advanced here this morning. There's no obvious money available for this project, and we had the staff confirm that we've got increased development charges we have approved with this project specifically being on the list of those things that would be eligible for, and in fact justifying why those development charges would be increased. We have our own infrastructure fund, which we put in place during the time of this council that could be used for that purpose, and we have, of course, the PTIF funding phase 2, $9 billion of money on which this specific project was listed as one of the projects that could be and will be the beneficiary of this. And so I just want to echo Councillor Thompson's comments as well. I am hearing from people more and more every day, get on with building it. Do not start to put up these arguments and these roadblocks and these kinds of things. And I will say to people, we are building it. Smart Track, I passed by this weekend. Again, a place right in Scarborough where the foundations of Smart Track are being built. The subway, the Scarborough subway, some of the infrastructure construction in current terms of utilities that have to be moved to accommodate that subway, that construction is happening this summer because that subway is moving forward. And on the LRT, this recommendation asks you simply to consolidate the planning into one so we can move ahead faster and consider it as one when the report comes back in the new year. And so I encourage members of council to support this, because it will, through the Scarborough Network Transit Plan, subway extension, Smart Track and LRT bring much needed, crucially needed transit, and with it jobs and investment to Scarborough. And so are there any other speakers that want to speak? Okay, well then let's call the question on the item 34.1, Eglinton East Light Rail Transit Project. Recorded vote. Recorded vote. Recorded vote.
All those in favor of the staff recommendations? Councillor Ainsley, Councillor Balau, Councillor Burnside, Councillor Crawford, Councillor DeGiorgio, Councillor McMahon, Deputy Mayor Holliday, Mayor Tory, Councillor Pasternak, Councillor Shiner, and Councillor Thompson. The report passes unanimously.
Thank you very much to Madam Clerk and to ladies and gentlemen of the committee. That brings us then to item 34.2, Toronto Senior Strategy version 2.0. And do you have my speakers list? I think you might. We have some deputations on that. Thanks. And the first deputant, how efficient could that be? Mary Hines.
Yes, sir.
And thank you for being.
Restart my clock.
Well, I will. No, that's my clock. I didn't start it. I don't know how that happened. But.
Well, no, I know everybody's been going like plus 3 minutes, and I want to make sure I get mine in.
You have the full time, and it starts now, and you're most welcome here. Thank you.
I have been involved with the senior strategy since 2012, first on the seniors expert panel and then on the accountability table. I also work with the Older Women's Network and am currently studying senior resilience at U of T. I applaud the continued existence of a senior strategy, and I'm especially pleased that 2.0 is the result of co-creation between seniors groups and relevant city staff. I hope this cooperation continues in the next term of council. I also hope that other city initiatives can have co-created planning. As you read the report, you see the extensive community consultation. Excellent, but very time-consuming and not feasible as a method for all future consultations for all city initiatives. There are ways to include the voices seldom heard in future consultation, such as reaching out to randomly chosen seniors or other residents. To implement the spirit of Senior Strategy 2.0, it is crucial that coordination of senior services must improve. With a new term, Council should give seniors at least as much attention as childcare, and ideally a specific committee of Council can be created. With regard to the way these recommendations are presented, there are 27 recommendations as opposed to the 91 of 1.0. But instead of general statements of long, short, medium, and long goals, we have the specifics of now and within the next term of council. Bravo. Some of the recommendations stand out for me. A seniors caregiver strategy is long overdue. Caregivers come from all age groups, but women especially bear the brunt from lost wages and subsequent lower pensions to the repeating demands of caring for parents, spouses, and other family and friends. Don't just consider senior-friendly outdoor fitness equipment. Many of us have been active for years, and others can renew the sense of fun that they had as their younger selves. It is one way to delay dementias. There are a number of housing recommendations because of the serious shortage of affordable housing. I will expand later, but housing and community hubs need to be considered together. Social housing is mentioned in the healthy food recommendations. Please remember, when you talk of social housing, you also mean co-ops, where people of many different economic levels live in equitable conditions. I also suggest that instead of aging in place, we talk about aging in community. We should not have to choose between remaining in a large, difficult-to-maintain home or moving to a long-term care facility that may not be in our local community. We should be able to live in appropriate housing for our needs within our community. And of course, new models such as intergenerational co-housing offer promise. Senior Strategy 2.0 is a well-thought-out plan for older adults in Toronto, and it deserves your complete support. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Are there questions of the deputant? Maybe I could just ask you one that I don't think you made a specific reference to, but when it comes to the challenge of aging in community,
yes,
as you said, one of the things I noticed in the report, and I've talked about this before, is, and it really underpins in some respects the item I think you're also listed to depute on, which is to do with the seniors housing, that it isn't just about housing, it's about trying to take what is in the senior strategy report, correctly referred to as a sliced up service delivery system, and trying to bring it together so that it's not impossible for seniors to navigate it. Could you just comment on the importance of that, on the importance of kind of making this navigable, if that's a good word, easy to deal with for seniors, people that you've talked to in your work on this?
Well, I find that many people are not aware of many of the services that the city already provides. And so certain areas are not getting a decent uptake, such as the fact that it's possible for seniors to delay or actually not have to pay certain taxes, property taxes. And I think that that's something that people are not getting enough information on. So we're not always reaching seniors, and we run into problems because the older seniors, the oldest old, frequently are not computer savvy or do not have access to computers, especially when people are low income and getting to the local library to use computers can be difficult. So it's really extremely important that we try to reach people where they are, and also try to get people to understand what's going on. If we could get seniors to be able to access their community, we would be preventing a great deal of loneliness that can lead to mental health issues. It would also keep people physically more active. So we need to put these pieces together in one complete strategy, which is why I'm suggesting that we need to have a coordinated area of the city. We have so many services that are in so many pieces. It's great that we have a seniors advocate, but that is not enough. It's a great first start, but it's not enough.
Thank you. Any other questions of Ms. Hines? Well, thank you very much for coming this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Jane Rowan, Toronto Seniors Forum. Good morning, Ms. Rowan. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
3 minutes, and then there may be some questions.
All right, I better try and read too. Anyways, I really thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Toronto Seniors Forum. Toronto Seniors Forum, we've identified issues that we're prioritizing, and some of them within housing, we support inclusionary zoning, universal design, improvements in social housing. We are concerned about the overcrowding in the TTC, accessible issues, signage, and affordability. And for years, we've been pushing for dental and vision care for low-income seniors. And we're concerned about the long-term care homes wait list and the impact the housing has on our health. We are in support of Vision Zero, and as such, we are featuring that at our annual June event on June 1st. Upon review of that report, the EX 34-2, I'd like to point out a few recommendations that are currently on our priority list. However, we do support all 27. Recommendation 1 will make it easier for seniors to access city services for seniors, and I think anyway, in my senior world, many do not use the 311 and the 211 numbers or have access to smart equipment. They get confused by these things, and so they don't know how to get help. It is confusing and frustrating when we are searching for something or need help. Recommendation 2, we have been advocating for free dental health services for low-income seniors for years and will continue to push for it. Recommendation 9 will help deal with the shortage of affordable senior housing in Toronto. We cannot apply for these units until we're 59 years old, and in some cases, like mine, I waited 12 years to get affordable housing in a seniors building. So by then, it was too late almost. Recommendations 10 and 11 will also assist with our housing needs, and we have written support recommendation. We've written a support recommendation to number 11, and I think that's to do with home share and something else like that. And we hope to be involved in the planning of it. Recommendation 17 covers our priorities with transit. As we mentioned before, we plan to be involved with Vision Zero on the identification of further senior safety zones. And recommendation 26, we are going to be, and we've always been involved in going out into the wards with senior fairs when we're asked. We support the Tenants' first report that's coming up, but I'm not speaking on it. However, I'd like to thank the accessibility, the accountability table, and we do support Vision 2.0. Sorry, I'm scared of speaking in public.
Not to worry, please, you're doing fine. Thank you very much. Keep going. Just we'll give you a few more minutes to
Toronto
wrap up.
Senior version 2.0, and we're going to work hard to work along with it, and thank you, and we hope that you'll support it.
Thank you very much for your comments, Ms. Rowan. Are there questions of the Deputy? Deputy Mayor Holliday.
Thank you for speaking to us today. You mentioned about the seniors' fair as one of the recommendations. I've been thinking forward about how that might operationalize, and it reminds me sometimes about our environment days where we have events all over the city. And I wondered, from your perspective and your experience with these, what are the most important aspects of the fairs or the public events that I think connect people or engage people? What do you think they'll be looking for in those?
Well, I was out in Scarborough, for instance, at one fair, and every time we had information on the Toronto Seniors Forum, and there were other services there, the biggest question was trying to find affordable housing. And they didn't know how to navigate the waiting list, you know, the Toronto one on Elm Street, right? Because it's very difficult to use. So that was usually the biggest thing. You know, it's almost like that was their big concern, is that thing. And of course, looking for free samples. Okay, and one other question for you. If you did one in every ward, you'd be looking at over 45 a year. And it would take the entire year to run through the course. Do you think it would be more efficient or preferable, I should say preferable, to have maybe fewer events but larger ones on a more frequent basis? Just in your estimation, your judgment. Well, I think it would be easier to have the larger events in central spaces because, like, you look at Scarborough, there's so much space. You know, you want to do North Scarborough, South Scarborough. Like, we were near the subway station when we did the one in Scarborough. And I can't remember where the other one was. But I think they're going to come out if there's more there and maybe some speakers, you know, maybe some free food too, coffee. Thank you for your advice.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Holliday. Other questions of this deputy? Well, Ms. Rowan, well, thank you very much for being here today.
I just want to mention manning 45 areas would be very difficult.
Thank you. Peter Clutterbuck, Interim Executive Director, Social Planning, Toronto.
Mr. Chair, committee
Good morning,
members.
sir. Thank you very much for coming, and you have 3 minutes, and then maybe there'll be some questions.
Thanks very much. I was before the Audit Committee on Friday morning talking about childcare services in the city, pretty essential for a demographic that includes my grandchildren. Starting out the week on the senior strategy is a demographic that I can more directly identify with. I congratulate the city, the Social Development, Finance and Administration, and the community in the actual process that produced this senior strategy. Social Planning Toronto was involved, but so were so many stakeholders in so many variety of ways that people were reached out to and engaged in setting up a strategy accountability table to actually work with the city on the solutions. And I saw all the recommendations that were proposed. Really serves as a model for policy development in this prior area of concern. I was going to talk about our own research released last year on the demographic change in Toronto and give some statistics. I don't have a lot of time for that, but clearly one of the fastest growing populations in the city are those over 65 years of age, and especially those even faster rate, twice the rate the normal growth of population between now and 2026, 10 years from now. It's even growing more quickly actually in the older age group, and this is citywide in neighborhoods across the city. So this is especially true, about 25% more women in this older category as we proceed into the next decade. I want to comment on the senior strategy in terms of its use of the World Health Organization age-friendly framework, core principles of equity, accessibility to the physical environment, and inclusiveness in the social environment is excellent. The adoption of an integrated service system management approach, as referred to earlier, is an excellent idea across the city's 5 functional service areas. Some really innovative stuff around how to support people in their own homes. As we all know, stable homes enables more effective delivery of other social and health supports and supports aging in place and community and avoids or delays placement in institutional settings. In fact, you know, one good measure of the success of this strategy 10 years or 5 years from now might be the reduced rate of admission to long-term care by supporting people in the home, and especially recognizing the importance of informal care, so supporting family caregivers and actually accomplishing the objective of having seniors remain active in their own communities. This report also recognizes that you must not see the senior population as monolithic, but in fact very diverse, the intersection with all kinds of diversity that we know too well. We're about to release our own report soon in June that points to the fact that language diversity is really important. If one of the issues is getting information to people and awareness of services, then clearly what we have to be aware is that being able to communicate with people. 45% of Toronto residents not speaking French or English are seniors. That's over 60,000 people. This is especially true for over 75-year-olds and will only get worse over the next decade. Well, not worse, but need to be accommodated over the next decade through innovative senior strategy approaches like represented here. So we support Senior Strategy version 2. It's ambitious but clear on how to move forward in the immediate and the medium term. And Social Planning Toronto hopes that the funding for the next stage of implementation will be included in the next city budget.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clutterbuck. Are there questions of the deputy? Could I just ask you one? I'm very, I don't want to say fixed on, but I'm very sort of focused on this business of making the system more navigable and having a better partnership in terms of actual service delivery to seniors, because I think right now, like a lot of areas, it's just nightmarish for people to confront the system. And I wondered if you would just comment on that from where you sit in terms of, you know, what specifically you would suggest might be done within the strategy, which clearly speaks to it and addresses it to make it easier for seniors just to sort of go and access what they need, including things you referred to.
One of the advantages of an integrated entity is that you can set up a capacity in the field for seniors to be able to access maybe any community service, like the no wrong door approach, essentially, where people can get to this entity and the supports it provides by being able to kind of train practitioners in the field that when certain issues come into a neighborhood center or a city center, you actually link them up with the agencies that are responsible. So kind of taking a no wrong door approach to meeting those needs and helping people, especially those who don't speak English, outreach effectively to them through their not just service centers, but church groups, faith groups, recreation programs that they're involved in. Most important thing is reaching people with what you have to offer.
Thank you very much. Yep. Thank you for your submissions. Next, we have Dr. Samir Sinha, Mount Sinai Hospital. Good morning, Doctor.
Morning.
Thank you for being with us this morning, and you have 3 minutes, and then there may be some questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and the Executive Committee. So my role is I'm a geriatrician. I work with some of the city's most frailest elders and those who are doing well. I'm also, as some of you know, I'm also the co-chair of the City of Toronto Senior Strategy Accountability Table. I also have a role provincially where I'm the provincial government's advisor on seniors, and also I've just been appointed as the Toronto Central LHIN's seniors lead. I was very proud to be a part of the development of the senior strategy here in Toronto. That's after we released our provincial first senior strategy back in 2012 that really gave some recommendations that allowed us to then create a strategy in 2013 that again was passed unanimously with 91 cost-neutral recommendations. I have to say that I'm very grateful that we have actually implemented 90 of the 91 recommendations. The only thing we couldn't do was actually move forward seniors dental. Now, in terms of Senior Strategy 2.0, you've heard about the level of engagement that's occurred. Over 10,000 people engaged across 44 wards. And again, people were talking about health and wellness, housing and transportation as some of their greatest issues. Many are very grateful for the variety of services that are received here in the city, but again, they know that things could be better. In terms of the 27 high-impact recommendations you've heard about, there are 18 which we want to be able to initiate within 1 year, and the rest that can be initiated within 2 to 4 years. And I want to speak to just the broad overlay of these aspects. First of all, we want to recognize that our senior population in Toronto is growing rapidly, and this is a positive thing, but how do we actually make things better? We recognize that the status quo cannot continue. Mr. Mayor, you focused on the fact that right now we actually have a number of services, 47 distinct services, in fact, that the city actually organizes across 15 different city divisions and agencies. At a provincial level, when we actually released our latest action plan for seniors in the fall of 2017, which in the budget encapsulated over $1 billion in new initiatives, one of the key things what we did was we created a single web page where a senior in Ontario could actually go. That's one example of how we could actually make things accessible, because we don't even have that on the City of Toronto website at the moment. In terms of integrated services for seniors, again, the key is what we want to do with this report is actually create a structural realignment so that we can actually organize services and housing together in one overall entity. I just want to finally remark that, again, about that Seniors Action Plan, the $1 billion that the province has actually committed towards seniors, we've actually been benefiting from a city, but not in a coordinated way. You've heard about the investments in community paramedicine that have significantly reduced 911 calls and transports. Recently, the government announced funding for new seniors community grants and seniors active living centres. Toronto, I'm proud to say, has received 8 of the new 40 that are being funded, but none of these were applications led by the city because we did not have a coordinated approach. And again, we are receiving 10 out of the $3,200,000 seniors community grants, only one initiated by the city, but the others initiated by citizens, because other jurisdictions, I reviewed all the grants, were actually well coordinated by Mississauga, Ottawa, and Hamilton that actually had a coordinated approach, and we were actually challenged.
I will have to stop you there. But I'm going to follow up with a question, if no one else does, just on exactly the point you were making in case you didn't get a chance to complete it. But there may be others who have questions, and I see Councillor Pasternak.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for coming in. It's widely believed in York Centre and North York that the Central LHIN gave the green light to the North York General Hospital to shut down the Branson Urgent Care Centre, which was community health care, vital for one of the highest concentration of seniors in the city. And I'm just wondering what the likelihood, because of your connection with the LHIN, that decision can be reversed.
So to answer your question, so I am actually the seniors lead for the Toronto Central LHIN. It's confusing because our city actually has 5 different LHINs that actually support it, which doesn't help the city to a certain extent. But in terms of the Central LHIN's approach, I don't know too much about the details of why they've made the decision to close the Branson LHIN. But we do actually have a new City of Toronto table where the 5 GTA LHINs actually meet with the city manager, and where we can actually bring an issue like this. So I'd like to take a note of it so that we could perhaps raise it at our next accountability table.
Yeah, it'd be appreciated if you could put it on the agenda. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor DiGiorgio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, with respect to the 5 LHINs, is there a movement to sort of merge some of those, or are we leaving those? Are we keeping the 5?
Right. So great question. So right now we have 14 LHINs across Ontario. There's 5 that actually share territory with the City of Toronto. Currently, this current government has actually made the decision to eliminate the CCACs and actually merge those programming with the LHINs. Obviously, we're in a provincial election. We will see what the new government of the day wants to do in terms of weather coordinating. But currently, when there was some realignment of things going on recently with the merger of the CCACs, none of the borders in the GTA were changed. I find it highly problematic personally as a citizen because my patients don't know which LHIN they're in. And frankly, in Etobicoke in particular, we have 4 LHINs that intersect at an intersection. And I can tell you with certainty that depending on which corner you get, you will actually get a different level of home care, which is not fair for the citizens of Toronto.
My second and last question, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned that of all the recommendations in the senior strategy presented by the province in 2012, if I heard you correctly, you said that there are, I don't know how many recommendations that are cost neutral. Now, by that, can you expand on what you mean? Does that mean you're basically making better use of existing resources? Is that how you retain cost neutrality?
Right. So this report, the provincial report, had 166 recommendations. Over 2/3 of them have been fully implemented, but that actually was tied with a lot of money, which again, my previous criticism was that the city didn't take full advantage of those opportunities. The City of Toronto Senior Strategy 1.0 had 91 recommendations. 90 of those have either been fully implemented or partially implemented, and that has been overall at a cost-neutral basis. Various divisions have actually worked within their own budgets to actually do those things. What we are admitting to is that 2.0 will take some investment. If we're going to create a website where we can actually coordinate things, that takes some resource. If we're actually going to now create an entity that can actually say, hey, no wrong door for a counselor, let alone a citizen, let alone me, who's trying to help navigate services for my patient. Right now, the challenge we actually have is there are a number of different things available federally, provincially, and here in the City of Toronto that are often underutilized. And I can tell you that over the last 5 years, there have been initiatives that the province has actually initiated. There are things that the federal government has initiated for seniors that have been withdrawn because the uptake was low. And I surmise that the uptake has been low because not enough people knew about them. If we can actually support our own citizens to say, these are I'll give you an example. The federal government in the recent budget passed the new Canada Caregiver Credit that I've been advocating for years. We have 8.1 million caregivers. They are now each eligible for $6,800 a year through their taxes. That's something that I don't think many of the councillors may know about, and many caregivers here in Toronto know about as well. We also have other grants. For example, one thing that was recently announced was in the budget that was just passed, $750 for every senior-led household in the province to help with things like snow shoveling and household maintenance. Let me translate that. Our folks here at the city got me the data. We have 121,000 senior-led households in Toronto who are led by seniors 75 and older. If we got every single one of those individuals simply just to apply for their funding, that would translate into $91 million more that we could actually use. There are great examples of jurisdictions in the UK and others where they actually take advantage of these opportunities to say the city can provide a coordinated response where we don't, and I'll give you an example. Right now, we shovel the driveways of 2,500 older seniors here in Toronto for an annual cost of $400,000. You could, with $91 million, you don't, and that's at $160 unit cost per household. Imagine when every senior household in Toronto is now eligible for $750. The city could provide a coordinated response from a number of other services and actually have a profit motive that could actually support support other services as well.
And that's a federal.
That is a provincial one that was just passed the other day in our budget, $750 per senior household, which would translate to $91 million available to the citizens of Toronto.
Okay, thanks, Councillor DiGiorgio. Other questions from Councillor Thompson?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you. You mentioned about the dental issues for seniors. What do we need to do in order to really address this? Because it appears to me that we have University of Toronto has their dental school, for example, where people can go in and get some assistance. Some of the hospital provides some services and so on. What is it that we need to do that we're not doing now? And if we were to do it, that in fact would provide the care to seniors?
I respectfully say, Councillor, to your question, we just have to wait till June 7th. Why do I say that? Because over the last number of years, through our City of Toronto Senior Strategy, that gave us a vehicle to advocate to the province. Through my role, I have worked with all the parties. I don't belong to a political party, but really helped raise the issue in government and with all of our parties around the importance of low-income seniors dental. I'm very happy to say that all three parties have not only committed to low-income seniors dental in various ways, shapes, or forms, but again, that will be available, I believe, within a year's time. That means that it behooves us as councillors, as citizens, to make sure that our citizens, especially our low-income seniors, know how they can access that service that won't be only available for citizens of Toronto, but also all older Ontarians who fit into that category. So all three political parties, if you want to look at their platforms, have committed to low-income, at least seniors dental or broader population. So we will accomplish that, but we need to take advantage of it. You will also see that seniors pharmacare is something that is actually coming through. The current government has proposed that and has agreed to launch that as part of the previous budget. And we have other parties that I believe are campaigning around similar aspects of that as well. We also have new funding for long-term care beds that has actually been announced for up to 30,000. Each of the three political parties have committed to at least 30,000 new beds. And again, there have been other announcements that are coming through. So these are, again, this is why I come back to the idea that we want to not only have services coordinated for seniors and counselors and anybody else and physicians like me to be able to navigate these services easily, more easily for these older adults, but we also want to make sure that as these new initiatives happen, we actually do have an entity. This is what we're talking about in the report, a seniors housing and services entity that, just like the City of Toronto's Children's Services, can actually well respond to these pieces as well. Our councillor before was asking, Deputy Mayor Holliday, about the seniors fairs, for example. I'm proud to say that the current Ministry of Seniors Affairs has actually put more investment for seniors fairs to occur. And again, we could take advantage of it. How do we get that funding? We have to apply. If we had a seniors housing and services entity that again could create coordinated responses, we would more likely get some of that new funding to run those seniors fairs, just like I see as I travel the province. Mississauga, Hamilton, Ottawa, they are machines. They always get the money. Why? Because they know how to ask and they're coordinated in that way. So I really see an opportunity how we can lead in Toronto as well.
I did have another question, but he's used up my 3 minutes.
Is it on a different?
No, it's, yeah, just I wanted to simply ask, I'm touching on technology utilization for seniors and so on, because I think that's a really important piece given the technical direction that society is moving in, and seniors are smart people. Just wondering, what are you proposing for them?
Yep, so I think again there's an opportunity that while seniors are the fastest growing group, Councillor, in terms of utilizing technology, they're the fastest growing group using Facebook, Twitter, and other methodologies. We know that there are some older adults who can't afford the internet, who can't actually afford a computer, and are maybe actually intimidated by using new technology. There are some great programs that are being initiated around the province. We were hoping, actually, one of our ideas that we were trying to put forward, but again, we couldn't coordinate for an application in time for a seniors community grant, which I was certain that we could have won, was where we actually take advantage of our network of libraries. Toronto Public Libraries has great computer opportunities, and again, we wanted to apply ideally for a $100,000 grant where we could actually offer intergenerational programming and training sessions, and we actually did fund through the Ministry of Senior Affairs these programs to occur in other jurisdictions where again they can train, they can create opportunities, because as you alluded to, seniors do want to learn, they do want to be engaged with their communities, and when we teach them how to use the internet, if that's what their desire is, we might also incorporate how they can go to that new tab on the City of Toronto website to learn about all the things that they're entitled to get, and frankly, if they do take advantage of, we'll actually lower the cost of them calling 911 in crisis, using our hospitals unnecessarily, because that's not what they want to do, and that's not what we want them to do either.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Any other members of the committee? Okay, well, I just had one that was really following up on this exact line, but I want to make sure I understand what I think you have said in terms of that question that I said I would ask you later, which is you keep talking about the existence of a, you call it here, a seniors housing and services entity. And do you think, we've got a matter coming up in a few minutes on which I don't think you're speaking, which is this seniors housing entity, and it's very much predicated on the notion of it being more than just a landlord, but also being the vehicle through which we coordinate a lot of the delivery to those people, meaning the tenants of Toronto Community Housing. But just on a broader basis, I'm really distressed at the fact that we're missing out on money for programs that could help seniors in our city, and that these other cities are, as you say, getting it right away. The housing thing, I have a sense, won't do it, because it's only housing to do with Toronto Community Seniors Housing. So just tell us what would you contemplate us having in place, and what do the other cities have in place that allow them to go and get these grants and do it, as you say, like it with military efficiency, so that we get that money and can provide it to our seniors?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in terms of last June, I deputed on the Tenants First initiative, which really talked about that opportunity to help bring out those 85 seniors housing building. We actually saw that as the accountability table, as our opportunity to now say, with that housing, we also know that it's not just about housing, as you said, it's about services as well. And we see this becomes the great anchor point for an integrated seniors housing and services division. The way, if I could actually have my dream, I would see that it would not only include those Toronto community housing buildings, but it could also coordinate services across the other community housing buildings, but also start giving a home to our long-term care homes that the city operates and runs, 10 in total, but also all these other 47 services. It's not a matter of saying we now bring one entity and run all those services, but we can actually have a more coordinated approach. So what currently is in store is that there is some staff secondments and some plans together to try and help create a core of a seniors housing and services division. And I would say the way we could predicate this is on our children's division, for example, that really is launched around the daycare services and then helps coordinate other things. That's how other cities have actually done it well. And I just ask that as you take a look at this opportunity and you take a look at the resourcing, that we've always been incredibly conservative in what we've asked for. I think this is a really good investment. As you can hear, we engaged 10,000 seniors from across the city who actually think this is a great idea. You've already heard my previous colleagues and deputants who've really said that this resonates with them and they think this would be exactly where we need to go, and that's actually how I see it being coordinated and organized. And it really gives us an opportunity, as you said, with military precision, to be able to make sure that people are getting what they need, that the city doesn't lose out on potential funding opportunities, and that we really make Toronto the best city to grow up and grow old in.
Just one final question on that very same thing. Again, I just was glancing through while you were speaking, and I apologize. I was listening to what you were saying, but also just looking. In the recommendations, I don't see anything that sort of speaks specifically to this notion of a place, as it were, that sort of makes sure that what there is, as you glance through the recommendations, again, is a multiplicity of places where people do things and recommendations they could do them differently or better, but not a place that says bring it all together and have this, among other things, this one-stop where all grants are applied for and received and so on. Did I miss something in the report, or is that?
So I think from what I understand is actually that there is an opportunity for a structural realignment, and I think that's the process that's supposed to happen right now over the coming year, and I think to come towards that recommendation to actually do that process. So I know that there's been a lot of great work in terms of the co-creation here with city staff to say this. I would just, if I was mayor, if I was a councillor, I might actually say, you know what, as you said before with transit, why are we thinking about it? If we know this is what we need to do, let's respond to this by saying, let's actually just commit towards seeing that through, because I think that's, if we've been speaking around the margins in terms of that recommendation, that it's not as clear as what you think, and hopefully the other councillors think would be the obvious thing to do, I would hope that we could just actually move towards that. But again, I've always worked with this city, I've always worked with the province by saying, what can we practically get done? And I think there is a commitment towards looking at a structural realignment, but there's a lot of politics at play here as well, and we want to just make sure that this moves forward ultimately to that vision that you've articulated, as Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Dr. Sinha. Be careful what you wish for about being mayor, by the way, but I'm sure this matter of structure will come up in the questions to staff later on, but I thank you for your patience in answering all these questions. Much appreciated, and for your work. Thank you very much. Katherine Wilkinson. Good morning, Ms. Wilkinson, and thank you for coming. And you have 3 minutes, and then there may be some questions.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor Tory, members of Executive Committee, advocates. My name is Katherine Wilkinson, and some of you may be familiar with, I am the outgoing tenant director at Toronto Community Housing. First of all, I want to say this report before us is brilliant, and it's life-changing, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Last year, I experienced firsthand the challenges caregivers face when assisting seniors, and it really hit home for me as I considered how the seniors in Toronto community housing would fare when they needed help most. That the city has brought the necessary stakeholders together, including all 3 levels of government, to address this issue is remarkable. Establishing a dedicated one-stop shop for seniors housing and services will not only better meet their needs, it will ensure that nobody gets left behind. I'm going to just speak to a couple of recommendations. Number 6, acknowledging the desperate need for caregiver support and respite will go a long way to ease not only the stress of caregivers, some of whom pay the price with their own health. Recommendation 10, I cannot understand why we can't house homeless people quicker in this city. Toronto Community Housing has hundreds of bachelor units they can't give away. Something to consider. Recommendation 14, I'm really excited and support the goal of Toronto becoming the first major city in Ontario to commit to becoming an age-friendly city. For me, still more needs to be done beyond the bricks and mortar. We must educate society and businesses to be the eyes, the ears, and the heart of the city. I'll give you a lived example, which actually happened outside of Toronto, but could very well have happened here. My 83-year-old dad was not at our usual meeting place. In that instant, I felt panic and fear about where he could be and if he was safe. We all watched the news. It was -23 and snowing. He had decided to walk the 2.5 kilometers home, but he had forgotten how to get there. He ended up at the drugstore seeking warmth and to ask for help. He was told by an employee, we are not allowed to let customers use our phones. I believe the only reason I found my dad that day was because he was so distraught and insistent that the cashier called me using her personal cell phone. Perhaps we consider a way in which to educate society and businesses and how to identify a senior that may be vulnerable or at risk and who to call when this happens, because a senior without an advocate is lost. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wilkinson, are there questions of the deputant? I appreciate that. I think that the last point you made is a small but really important kind of thing too. Thank you very much for that and for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
Lillian Wells. Good morning, Ms. Wells. Thank you for coming. And you have 3 minutes, and there may be some questions.
I'm pleased to speak to the Mayor and Executive Committee. I'm speaking on behalf of the Toronto Council on Aging, which formed at the time of amalgamation of the city, drawing membership from the various former municipalities. We promote understanding and positive attitudes to aging and work to counteract ageism and discrimination. We encourage the participation of older adults in all aspects of community living and to educate public understanding and awareness of aging issues. Coming at the end of the deputants, I won't repeat, but I will want to emphasize what the people speaking before me have made points on. We've been involved with the city's development of the Toronto Senior Strategy since the beginning, being on the expert panel and now on the accountability table. And for me personally, I must say the linkages with staff, city staff, the opportunity to work with them, we are really fortunate, I think, to have such creative, knowledgeable, and dedicated people engaged in improving our city. The report, I think, is really excellent. We're very excited about it and encourage you to move forward in implementing it. We know that one of the major problems across the city in downtown, midtown, and in Scarborough is the problem of coordination and of understanding information and being able to access information. Toronto, being the largest city, has, I think, particular problems with the organization that we need to take particular attention to. Unlike the Mississauga and Hamilton and Ottawa. One of our more recent activities that Toronto Council on Aging has been involved in was linking seniors and youth volunteers working toward as intergenerational partners to identify age-friendly features of businesses in Midtown Toronto. And I think we're a volunteer-based organization, and the opportunities available for volunteers will strengthen the work of moving toward an age-friendly city.
I'll just ask you to make maybe one concluding comment, Ms. Wells, and then we'll see if there's some questions.
The Ministry of Finance projects that 30 to 35% of Toronto residents will be 65 and older by 2041. It's time to move forward in implementing the recommendations of the project.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wells. Are there questions of Ms. Wells from members of the committee or otherwise? Okay, thank you very much for your thoughts. We appreciate that. That brings us to the end of the list of deputations, and so that would take us then to questions of staff. Are there any members of council visiting with us that want to ask questions of staff? I don't see any. Okay, questions of staff from, one thing I might clarify just before we go to questions of staff to avoid a bunch of questions. The city manager's brought to my attention the fact that in the next item coming up, or one of the two ahead, the housing item, there actually is a recommendation to get back a report on creating this services entity for seniors. I took it because it was inside the housing item that it referred only to TCHC, but in fact it's much broader and really refers to exactly what the doctor and a number of the other deputies were saying to us. So there actually is a report coming back on restructuring, I think it was the word that was used, that could take place. And we'll see that when we deal with the item on seniors housing coming up, but it's a general item and not specific to TCHC. When I read it, I thought it was only TCHC. Are there other questions of staff on this matter, Deputy Mayor? And Councillor Ainsley, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am looking for the number here, but it's really a question for PF&R. There is a recommendation here about modifying some of the plans that we may have for exercise systems in parks to be more supportive of seniors. And I wondered if staff could expand a little bit on the program that we have or plans that we have to implement fitness equipment in the parks, and where that funding comes from. Is this proposing some additional work to be done, or is it really modifying the plans that we have in place in consideration of the needs of seniors?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, this is a program we've been doing for quite some time now, for several years, not necessarily as an additional program, but as part of our usual parks development. So as an instance, if we were redeveloping a park or building a new park as part of the public consultation process, if there was an interest in seniors equipment, outdoor equipment, which isn't just for seniors, can be for people of all ages, we would incorporate it into that planning and part of that associated budget. So we're not looking for additional money through this report, but we are reconfirming that this is a very popular program and has been a very effective program and is something that we should continue within the parks planning.
Thank you, and I'll ask a question to different staff about the proposal for seniors information fairs. And I just wondered how far we were in the planning for that, because I noticed it's a medium time horizon. And just along the lines of the question that I had asked the speaker today about what's the vision for how these are going to work? Is it the idea that we'd have one in every ward, or would we have something that's a more consolidated fair, maybe a little bit larger in different parts of the city?
Through the chair, the recommendation is to initially do it at a ward level. Although if a group of wards or a community identified that a different geography would work more efficiently, then we'll certainly pursue that. In terms of who will actually do the work, it's the Community Resources Unit in Social Development, Finance and Administration who are working in communities across the city now.
Do we have any concerns over, I guess, fatigue from the groups that would attend the particular events? So if there was a mainstay group that attended all 40, I guess it's 47 now, that they may have trouble making it to all of the events, and is there any thought beyond maybe pushing opportunities to consolidate into larger events?
I believe part of the intent is to do these community specifics, so we would work with the local community to understand what issues in particular are priority in that part of town and tailor the sessions to the local communities. Where there are issues or information need that are citywide, absolutely, we would look at more regional events or citywide events to distribute that information.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Deputy Mayor Holiday. Are there other questions of staff? Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Tory. I'm just looking at Appendix G and the recommendation number 2 about a free dental clinic. And I was actually just speaking with a number of seniors in my ward the other day, and they were complaining about the fact when they go to a city dental clinic, and if there's anything more complicated, they end up being referred to a dentist. And are we giving a basic level of dental care, and then that'll still be, for anything more complicated, they'll be referred somewhere else?
Through the chair, yes, we do give a basic level of dental care. We do have a relationship with the University of Toronto, where for some care requiring specialist services, we can help to connect the seniors with the university to do that. But you are right, it's a basic level of care.
Okay. All right. And then I was also recommendation number 12. So we're only looking as our senior population ages. We're looking at developing one new homeless shelter for seniors for the entire city. Is there a goal of building more than that somewhere down the road, or is this going to be it?
Well, through the chair, hopefully there will be more housing available, and therefore we won't have a need for additional seniors designed shelters. We know that there is demand now. That's why the initiative is happening. And if need be, we will then have a program model that we can use further. But ideally, it will be housing, not shelters that people are living in.
Okay. And then in many of the recommendations, it has, for example, medium term expected to be initiated within 2 to 4 years. So initiated, that's based on budget, and you're looking at it'll start in 2 to 4 years, or it'll start and finish in 2 to 4 years?
Most of the recommendations are funded, so we've tried to, and working with the accountability table, identify activities that are already funded and able to move forward. There are some that will require a funding strategy. The broader dental service is a very good example where we will need to have additional funding, and that's where we've indicated would start in a year.
Okay, and then I was looking at version 1.0, so there was 91 recommendations, 69 have been fully completed, 21 are partially completed, some of those are being rolled into version 2.0, and then when I looked at the appendix at the back of there's another list of recommendations, and they total almost 131. So I'm just trying to understand how that list of 131, does that get incorporated into 2.0, or is there a 3.0 coming where they're going to roll into that?
So
Through the chair, what that is a list of recommendations that came from the accountability table. The high impact recommendations, the 27 high impact recommendations, were fully processed through staff, so they were discussed whether they were feasible or who would do them, budget, etc. But there was a lot of additional recommendations from members of the accountability table of just things that were not fully thought out in terms of the policy development. So who would they impact? Who would do it? How much it would cost? But we didn't want to lose all of that good work. So what we did is put that together that is essentially saying if there ever was a seniors housing and services entity at the city, look at this list as you're considering your work plan.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Tory.
Thanks, Councillor Ainsley. Councillor Pasternak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff. Just back to the dental issue. It's my understanding Toronto Public Health has a mobile dental unit, and I'm just wondering whether that is at capacity or that's being leveraged to help fulfill the recommendations before us.
Through the chair, the mobile dental unit is 100% funded by the province. Therefore, the programs that are delivered through the mobile unit are reserved for provincially funded program. The seniors dental program is funded 100% by the city, and therefore we really are not in a position at this time to utilize that mobile dental unit to enhance the capacity to treat seniors. We have been advocating to the province to do so, but have not been successful to date.
Okay. When it comes to the seniors fairs, my understanding is that many of our social agencies host those. Bernard Patel in particular in Ward 10, Circle of Care, Costi, Luma Care. Are we taking that on to organize those as if it was environment days across the city? Are we letting our social capital take the lead on that?
Through the chair, we would absolutely work with our NGO partners. So in a community where there is a well-established information fair and there isn't the demand, we would deal with it differently. So it's not meant to duplicate or replace work that's being done by our nonprofit agency partners.
And when they run these fairs, do we make sure that the City of Toronto has a voice there, has a booth or a table to make sure that participants in those fairs understand about senior services at the city? I mean, access to programs is probably the biggest barrier we're facing in seniors.
Through the chair, absolutely. There is outreach from a number of city divisions that would participate in such fairs.
Emergency response, whether it's an extreme weather event or whether it's an industrial accident or so forth, what is embedded in here to make sure that we understand that there's specific and unique needs in high concentration of senior neighborhoods for immediate response in certain, whether it's blackouts, whether it's an ice storm, whether it's an industrial accident? Where can I look for quick solutions when we have our vulnerable populations?
That was not explored deeply through this process. There is an ongoing discussion with our Office of Emergency Management colleagues in terms of the kind of notification, particularly for vulnerable populations in general, not just seniors, looking at how we do that better.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Pasternak. Other questions of staff on this matter? Okay, thank you for that then. We would move next then to speakers anybody from outside the committee. I don't see any members of council here, so we can move to members of the committee wishing to speak. Okay, Councillor Pasternak, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd just like to thank staff for their work on this. This is not an easy piece as our population is growing exponentially, certainly 65 and over, and preparedness for the age quake, which is pretty well on us already, is essential. But at the same time, I think we have to look closely at what services are there, making sure that people understand that those services are available. Our office has to constantly educate our populations about the tax deferral program, the tax increase elimination, and how that all works. At the same time, housing continues to be the major theme, although I know the next item is focused on housing. Dozens of seniors come into our office looking to get into a social housing environment. And the first thing we do is examine their paperwork and look at the choices they have made, the areas of the city they want to live in, and the kind of units they're applying for. And much of the paperwork is not appropriate for their situation, and we spend a lot of time working with them to making sure that the paperwork is appropriate. And that's an ongoing conversation. The other thing we have when we talk to seniors is their various federal benefits, whether it's CPP or OAS or GIS or survivor's benefit, or whether it's a military pension, and many of our seniors are actually not getting their full entitlement from the various federal support programs. And once they are online to actually receive those funds, they are in much better shape to afford the housing that they're currently in and don't necessarily have to be in social housing. We've got to look more and more at our bachelor units and leveraging the capacity there, as well as fixing up empty units that are no longer inhabitable due to state repair. Another issue we have to look at is Wheel-Trans north of Steeles and create a more harmonized system with the city of Vaughan, making sure that we can do our best to link up with services up there so we don't have to leave seniors on street corners. A regular concern is actually the integration of the senior transportation network between the City of Toronto and the City of Vaughan. But that being said, this is an ongoing conversation. I think I'm going to have some motions up at Council. But I want to thank staff again for their diligence on this file.
Thank you, Councillor Pasternak. Other speakers? Well, if I might just say a word. Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor Barlow.
Thank you. And I do have a motion on this item. I also want to start by thanking staff. There was an incredible amount of work that was done in here to engage with the communities and to bring forward a strategy that is supportive and inclusive of the seniors and the groups that have been for a very long time working on this issue. So there's basically two big issues that are brought forward is not only the coordination that is needed with the supportive services for seniors and the much better work that we need to do to leverage these services to provide a better service to seniors. And then there's obviously the issue around housing. And the motion that I have in here is specific to that is something that we've been working on already on seniors housing. And we want to make sure that there's more than just seniors housing, that we start looking at the continuum of care for seniors, and most importantly, to create the opportunity for people to move around. One of the things that I keep hearing from seniors, for example, in my community, a lot of them would love to be able to move, for example, to a smaller house, but they don't want to leave their community. They don't want to leave everything that they know for the last 40 years. So as we're planning our city, as we're planning our housing, it is really important that we keep in mind that we have to create opportunities for people to be able to move into their communities. I was reading a study that said that in the Greater Toronto Area, we have about 2 million empty rooms in our city. Well, why do we think is that? Is because people do not see the opportunity, they don't see anything else they'd like, they desire to move from where the houses they have right now. So how do we create the opportunity so people can still be in their communities, have the services that they need, and feel like they are independent, contributing members of the society, and housing is a big, big, big part of that. So when we are talking about
senior strategies, it is essential that not only we look at all the support services and how we can leverage that from all three orders of government, and us being so close to the people to make sure that people understand how to access those services, but also as we are planning our city, as we are creating our housing in this city, that we ensure that people have the flexibility and then the support services to be able to move around in their community. So when their kids, you know, if they feel like they need a smaller house, they can move to a smaller house. If they feel that they need a support, you know, a housing benefit, that they need some of the government support, that they can have access to that. If they need to move then from, you know, affordable housing to long-term care housing, that those systems are in place in our communities to truly serve people around. Because at the end of the day, when we do this, we're not only facilitating all the housing for the seniors, we're facilitating all the housing for the families that then will benefit from the houses that the seniors will make available, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole ecosystem, as I usually call it, that is really important to look at here. And that is why this is so important. This is the fastest growing segment of our population. We need to make sure that we have the most caring support services, but also the most effective services.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Other persons wishing to speak? Well, if I might just make a few comments, I want to begin as well by thanking our staff and all those involved in the community. It's evident there's a lot of consultation, I think, as our very first deputy mentioned on this, that has taken place, and it allows for a wealth of information to be in the report that allows you to understand why housing is such a priority, because people said so. And that's the most important thing, is people with lived experience. So I want to thank our staff and the advisory committee and all those who've had a hand in writing up this report. I'm very heartened as one person, because, you know, there's endless reports that are written around here, but when you can follow up, and as you've heard 2 or 3 deputies make reference to today, and see that I think it was 90 out of 91 or some such number of the recommendations in 1.0 have actually been implemented in whole or in part. And I think that's a very heartening and important thing to be able to say when you move on to 2.0, because sometimes you move on to 2.0 and nobody really takes account of whatever happened to 1.0. I'm disheartened by what we've heard from Dr. Sinha in particular about the fact that there's money left on the table, you know, by the City of Toronto as distinct from other municipalities who do a better job of taking advantage of these different programs that are offered by the other governments. We are not in a position to leave money on the table, and it's not even about money. It's about the fact that that means, in turn, that our seniors are missing out on some of the benefits of those programs that are financed by the other governments. And so I think that is a really clarion call for us to do better on that, which is not await 2.0. It doesn't await even the establishment of a seniors entity, which I hope is going to happen pursuant to the report we're going to refer to in the next item, but just because we determine that we're going to do better. And so for me, I'm more focused than ever on the notion of a service delivery entity, which will come up in the next item, and making that happen as soon as possible, not having it, again, be something where there's an endless report that takes you know, months and months and years for us to receive before we can just get on with doing it, and to use the wording of this report to unslice the sliced up service delivery structure that exists now between and among all 3 governments and various agencies. We've got to unslice that and put it back together, and I think that's what this entity could do. You know, I think half the time it's not the lack of existence of money to finance things for seniors. It is, you know, it is this Byzantine system that's in place. If you didn't know better, you'd almost think that it was a deliberate obstruction course or obstacle course put in the way of people to make it difficult for them to find their way to the service that they need. And I think we have to rectify that. That's all of us as governments together saying there's got to be a much more easily understood and easily used system to get these services that are out there. And there's huge numbers of programs. We've heard probably 10 different ones referred to this morning, and that's a tip of the iceberg. So I think this is a wonderful piece of work. It's a good start, but I think there's some things we have to do collectively and work with the other governments to actually make sure it's easier for seniors to get the help that they often need to make sure they can live a good and independent life, as most of them want to do. So if there's no other comments that anybody wants to make, we would be able to proceed first to deal with Councillor Bailau's amendment, a motion rather, and then which amends the item, proposes to, and then we can deal with the item itself. We'll just wait for the clerk to come back, and we'll put up on the screen Councillor Bailau's motion. So there's the motion by Deputy Mayor Bylaw, and you can see it there. She's moved it. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And then the item is amended. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Very good piece of work, and thank you to the deputies who are here with us today. That helped us a lot. Okay. That brings us to 34.3, which is entirely related to 34.2, and it's the implementing tenants first. And we have some deputations on that. We have, in fact, we have 10 deputants on that. So we'll go right to that and ask first if Marcel Pereira, founder, Save Improve Toronto Community Housing Corporation, could come up and speak first. Not here. All right. We'll go to the next person. If Marcel Pereira shows up, we can deal with that later. Mary Hines, I know, is here. And Ms. Hines, welcome again, and thank you, and please proceed.
Seniors Liaison Committee and a student at U of T researching senior resilience and a senior, or more properly, an older adult. The proposed integrated service model calls for partnering with the Toronto Central LHIN and the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care to integrate services. Of course, the Toronto Central LHIN is only one of the 5 LHINs that service Toronto and the surrounding regions. Good to begin with one LHIN, but to be successful, all the LHINs will eventually have to be included. It is crucial that there is a robust senior hubs plan. Senior hubs located in or near the new seniors housing entity or any housing with a large number of seniors will be instrumental in maintaining and improving seniors' physical and mental health. Places where seniors can engage in mental stimulation, physical activity, and social connections are places that will enable seniors to live longer, more healthy lives with a reduced incidence of dementias. These locations may or may not be at seniors' active living centers, but they must be open to seniors from the greater community. The Tenants First Tenants Senior Advisory Panel should continue to play an important role in implementing the Tenants First policy. Ideally, the committee should evolve into a co-creating body to plan the program management of the hubs, similar to that of the senior strategy. Assuming recommendations from items EX 34-2 and EX 34-3 are motioned to go forward to the next City Council meeting, they will join CD 28.1 as seniors issues. If approved, they must not be hived off into separate silos from implementation. There should be as much integration of implementation as possible. I can only hope that the confidential portion of the recommendations is a plan to replace the uninhabitable buildings with a plan to create new affordable housing on the sites, not just partially new affordable housing, but completely new affordable housing. Do not just build a high-rise and put the 8 scattered housing units into that high-rise. It should become an affordable housing unit. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Are there questions of the deputant? All right, I'll thank you very much, Ms. Hines, for your deputation. Katherine Wilkinson.
Hi there, me again. Want to talk about this important report before us, item 34.3. So to save some time, I'm just going to mention the action items by the numbers from the previous report. Glad to hear the emergency response system is working for so many people's phones. In 2008, Toronto Community Housing reduced the number of operating units from 27 to 13, as many of us know, which centralized many of the tenant-facing services. This model did not serve tenants well. Here we are. Some of the seniors are hard-pressed to build consistent and trusting relationships when some of the staff they depend on are constantly changing. This makes it far too easy for seniors to slip through the cracks. To put the needs of tenants first, adequate staffing is critical to the new model. Ask any tenant living in Toronto Community Housing and they will know of seniors struggling in their community. Some neighbors try to bridge the gap by providing supports where none exist. In Action 2, establishing a separate seniors housing unit with dedicated staff who can focus on meeting the unique needs of seniors will serve our tenants well. Any specialized training provided to staff in seniors buildings should also be provided to staff in mixed buildings to ensure equitable service delivery for seniors across the portfolio. Action 3, aligning city services along with the creation of the community hubs helps to ensure that the services are tailored to the unique diversity of the tenants themselves within each community. I am pleased the transition team will consider where the Office of the Commissioner of Housing Equity should be located in the new entity. This office has been quite successful in identifying the root causes that lead to potential eviction of seniors, avoids eviction costs, recoups arrears that may otherwise be lost, is able to access supports and make appropriate referrals to ensure seniors remain successfully housed. At a cost of $5,000 to evict a tenant, these resources could be better invested in intervention, reducing the cost of homelessness, and providing compassionate treatment for our seniors. This is what the Office of Commissioner of Housing Equity brings to the table. Extending these services to all seniors in the city's social housing sector aligns with the city's Senior Strategy 2.0. Thank you to the Tenants First panel members, city staff, and Toronto Community Housing for your dedication to keeping the Tenants First plan focused and on track. I look forward to watching the transformation evolve and celebrating the milestones along the way. I am in full support of the 8 recommendations before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilkinson. Are there questions of the deputant? All right. Well, thank you very much for being with us again this morning. Robert Fredrickson. Hello, Mr. Fredrickson. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. And you have 3 minutes, and there may be some questions.
Okay. Mr. Chair and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to speak to this important issue. I fully support all the recommendations in this report and the timelines attached to these recommendations. I am pleased to hear that Toronto Community Housing, the City of Toronto, Local Health Integrated Networks, and the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care will be collaborating with each other to ensure that all seniors have access and receive the same care. To ensure that the supports provided are the supports needed by the seniors within the community. For example, proper services to meet the needs of the community. There should be a yearly review of these services to ensure that they are providing what is needed in their community. My thanks to the Tenant First panel staff and all others who were involved in generating another excellent report that will help to improve the lives of seniors who live in Toronto Community Housing and throughout the whole city. I look forward to working with those tasked to do this work to ensure seniors in the city receive the reports they require. As the seniors of yesterday paved the way for me to enjoy what I have as a senior today, I feel it only fitting that I help pave the way for those who will follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fredrickson. Are there questions of the deputy? Well, thank you very much for taking the trouble to be here today, sir. We appreciate that. Doris Power. Good morning, Ms. Power.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming this morning.
To you all. I'm with a number of tenant associations and disability organizations, and I guess because of Senior Strategy and the Tenants First report, I should disclose that I'm a member of both the Seniors Forum and Tenants First advisory panels, and I'm not speaking on behalf of either of those groups today. Instead, I'm speaking on behalf of the senior tenants in Toronto Community Housing. And I'm speaking specifically to the confidential item number 2 in the Tenants First report. And there isn't a senior in any of those 21 homes, 21 buildings, that agrees with your position. And there isn't the majority of seniors or tenants in this city that agree with that position. And in 3 minutes, I don't have time to go into what could be solutions or anything, but we need some creative lawyers and creative planners in the city, and some of those buildings can be transitioned back into the ones that are going to be covered under the seniors division, and some could go to specific needs, and boy, do we have specific needs, and more services go into those that are specific to those services. I am confident that there isn't one person on the executive committee or in council that would put their mother into a building where criminals are allowed to just carry on, where you can go out and find excrement in the hall, people urinating in the elevators, where your mother would have to run the gauntlet with people, with gangs and so on. And all of this was what? To put down the waiting list? Well, I'm sorry. You're putting people at risk, and in fact, you're putting the addicts at risk as well, and the mentally ill at risk, and all the people that those seniors want to put out of those homes, those buildings. Some buildings could go for those things. God knows we need more care and care homes and long-term care and supportive housing in this city. All the consultations that we've gone to and the hundreds of tenants that I've heard from over time, I could tell you stories that nobody's listening. You're wasting a lot of money on consultations if you're not going to listen to the tenants. And tenants, nothing about us without us. You've got to start listening harder to the tenants. And,
It's a start. I tell you what, I'll ask you a question just to allow you, and I'll put the clock on myself. What were you about to say that you didn't get time to say because the clock ran out?
At the present time, I don't know if people here know it, but right now, Toronto Community Housing is going through more consultations, and right now they're going through redoing a crisis priority system. People here are talking about, we know that in 10 years, 1 out of 4 people will be a senior in this city. And we don't only need deep, affordable housing, we need accessible, affordable housing. And at the present time, just last week, TCHC was saying, we only had 300 applications for modifications in buildings this year. And they were proud of the fact that they did all of them except 85. Well, I'm sorry, other people didn't put in because they knew they'd have a snowball's chance in hell of getting anything, because we have people who are splitting up their families because nobody puts up a railing for the stairs. We have people where, last week again, I met a young man who at 21 years old, developmentally handicapped, was put in a homeless shelter while his mother, and he was on the outskirts of Scarborough, and his mother was put in a long-term care facility out, she's only 56. She's out in Etobicoke somewhere. How often can they even get together? They need an accessible apartment with a 2-bedroom apartment, and they need to be together. This is inhumane. And then I'm thinking of the people who can't sleep all night that are in seniors' buildings where you've put in other people who are mentally unstable, and there's ranting and raving all night long. You can't get any sleep. I'm just out of hospital again myself. For a month I was in there, and one of the wards they put me on in one hospital was the geriatrics ward, and I got to tell you, I was the only person there that wasn't suffering from dementia. And if I had to stay too long in that situation, I would be crazier than I am right now. And I tell you that that's what's happening to people in the buildings where other people have been put in that are totally inappropriate. Even our mayor has been criticized for pointing out the fact that we have a lot of mental illness in our city and in our housing. And instead, nobody is saying we want to see those people out on the grates or in the stairwells. We're saying they need housing as well, but they have different needs.
Can I try and squeeze one more in, because just I'm at my limit. Just back on the business of the modifications to units, and look, heaven knows I wouldn't mess with you any more than I'd mess with my mother, who I wouldn't win any discussion with. But is it possible that when you actually flip it around and say that 215, I'd rather it was all 300 of those applications were done last year, but is it possible that the problem isn't so much that people feel it's hopeless, because 215 out of 300 means quite a lot of projects did get done, that the problem really is we haven't educated people well enough about how to apply, so they don't apply, and so that, that they obviously don't get it if you don't apply. Is it possible we need to do more to make sure people know?
That's perhaps some of it, but when we say modifications, we don't know if Toronto Community Housing meant they put a stupid little bar up. We don't know if they mean something as small as that. When we're looking at revitalizations and everything, why are we not looking at universal design? Why are we not changing the building codes and thinking of the need we have for accessible housing? My house, where I live, is inaccessible. There is no point in putting in. For the transfer system, I started to say before, now they're going to have everybody who's on that crisis waiting list is going to have to all apply again. And now they're going to rediscover, recreate what a crisis is. And for some people, I mean, there's been stupid things on that where somebody with sleep apnea thinks they deserve a transfer because the man snores and his wife is tired of it. You know, no, we're talking real crisis. Like the example I just gave you of a family that's been split up. And that's not fair, it's inhumane. And to keep people with dementia in the buildings is unfair as well. They've forgotten how to use the stoves. And 88% of your fire calls are from who?
Thank you very much, Ms. Power. Are there other questions of this deputy? All right. Well, thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate that. Susan Gapka. Susan here? I haven't seen her this morning. Okay. Dega Noor. Is it Dega Noor approaching the? There we are. Now, perhaps. Are you here as, yeah, just, I haven't started yet, but are there, just so I can make sure we all introduce ourselves, that would be terrific. Because I have Dega Noor down here, but maybe I won't start the clock until you've introduced yourselves, and then I'll start.
Hi, I'm Dega Noor.
Okay.
Ingrid Palmer. Mr. Mayor, good day.
Sorry,
Chair.
we didn't finish introducing all four.
My name is Sharon Folksall.
Okay, and last but not least?
Carlene Stair.
Okay, now I have you down as four separate people. So what I normally do with that is give you more latitude than 3 minutes, so that you could have, 6 minutes or so to make your piece, and then we will have some, I'm sure maybe have some questions. Is that okay?
Okay.
Just so you don't feel unduly rushed, and so we appreciate your being here, and why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, John Tory, and the members of the Executive Committee. Thank you for listening to what we have to say today. My name is Deka Noor, and I'm a member of the Tenant First Advisory Panel. This panel is genuinely representation of the diversity of the tenants living in Toronto community housing. We range in the ages of 21 to 80. We have a wide variety of ethnic, and a racial background. We came from Etobicoke to Scarborough and North York and downtown. Reflective of the general population, some of us have disabilities. We live in apartments, townhouse, and single family homes. Mr. Mayor, we're a student, parents, singles, and seniors. We are actively engaged throughout our communities in many ways. A number of us are tenant representatives. 4 of us belong to the city-wide Tenants for Social Housing, and some are active in disabled organizations. One is with the Seniors Voice, one is with the Older Women's Network, 3 work with children and youth programs. One is a co-chair of the Inner City Advisory Committee of Toronto District School Board, and one of us belong to the City of Toronto Senior Forum. Mr. Mayor, members of the Executive Committee, we support the recommendations in this report that will benefit seniors in TCHC and in the City of Toronto. Mr. Mayor, the growing population of seniors is not a burden to our society. Seniors have contributed into our society, and they continue to contribute. This growth of seniors is a blessing to us. If I just give a little story of a background of mine, my father is a senior, and at the moment, he is actually needs to services and to access support. Because of that, I'm not a senior, but we have seniors that are family, that live in our community. Some of our seniors do need to access support and services, just like my father, who did everything in his community, his family, and now he also needs some support. And this is why we're here for our TCHC seniors to get the support and the services that they need. Accessing senior housing services to support our services, the time is now, and we thank you for taking the time and inviting us. Thank you.
That others of your colleagues that are with you have a chance to comment as they wish, and of course they can answer questions too, but are others of you wanting to make some comments, because we have some time, because we had you as 4 different people, or 4 different...
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah,
thank you,
good.
Mr. Mayor and Executive Council. I really appreciate the opportunity to be before you again and to speak. We've had so many wonderful comments this morning, both on this item and the previous item, so I'm going to try my best not to be repetitive, but to add to that conversation. It was mentioned about the need for our seniors as they grow older to be able to have better access to the services that are for seniors, and I can tell you with the consultations and speaking with seniors that it was really disheartening for me to discover how little our seniors know about the services that are available to our city. So one of the things that came out of our consultations was the need to better inform our seniors about what programs are actually available from the city so that they may access it. We did have a chart that listed city programs, provincial programs, and federal programs, and they are really excited to see this chart and would like to have that chart available to them, whether it's through email and whether it's through being able to have it actually posted in their physical buildings. In terms of the hubs that is supported by the Tenants First report, as was noted earlier by many of the earlier deputants, it is important that within these hubs that the seniors have access to health services, social programs, computer skills, and food programs. It was also brought up that with these hubs, it is also important that the seniors have some type of transportation access. Many of them do not, for whatever reasons, qualify for Wheel-Trans, but would still be in need of some type of community bus in order to access these hubs. So that is another important consideration that the Tenants First report addresses. Last week, we had 5 information meetings across the city that was attended by approximately 150 seniors. So tenants that attended did let us know that they want better communication between the residents and Toronto Community Housing staff, and that this would help in declining the number of people being evicted from their homes due to things such as lack of filling out their annual report. If there was a better connection between Toronto community staff and the tenants, then they would maybe understand that there is maybe a mental health issue going on or some other problem why the yearly report, the yearly review was not filled out, and then instead of evicting tenants, you could help direct them towards resources so that the tenancies will be more successful.
I'll just point out, I don't know how many of you are going to speak, but if you're trying to divide up the time and you've used...
I'm going to...
Okay.
I believe I'm the last speaker.
So fine. Okay, then you go ahead. Fine. Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay. Oh, I heard that.
Oh, there's one more speaker?
Like to.
Okay, well, if you just want to conclude, and then we'll move on to the last speaker.
We also heard that the tenants are in need of services in a wider variety of languages that are pertinent to whatever communities they belong to. So in the creation of these hubs, it's important to have whatever languages are needed in those hubs to be available. And it's also important that the seniors are involved in the creation of the hubs so that each one will be geared to the needs of that particular community. And we really saw with the great turnouts that we had that seniors do want to be consulted, do want to be involved in the creation of anything that is pertinent towards them. And so we will keep working as an advisory panel with the tenants to make sure that they have a voice in all stages of our work. And I will now hand over to Sharon, who would like to also add to the conversation.
Well, you said it all. The thing that I'm going to add to it, and is because of my own background, and I love community. I am a communal person. That is my background. I will say something in my own language, and it's just a plain thing that we greet each other with, but it has loaded meaning. It says, are you good? Are you good mean that, did you eat today? Did you sleep today? Do you have a secure roof over your head or clothes on your body? And I think these are necessity needs and very core needs for people to function in this society. And when I'm on the panel talking about what we need for seniors, I have some regret. I have regret, Mr. Mayor, because we shouldn't be talking about it. We should be in place, have things, services in place that works for seniors. And Doris talked about a lot of areas that we need to cover, so I won't even go into them. All I have to say is that it's time we step up to the plate, and I hope we do so. I am on this panel because I want to see some changes. I live at 40 Asquith Avenue. I mean, I've been following around Anna Basio for a long time. I was pushed out of the Lansdowne area, Davenport, because of high increase in rent. I moved down to 40 Asquith Avenue. I love it there. It's also a place that I belong. I belong to that area because I can walk to my university. My university is Ryerson. I just completed my social work program. I can walk to the doctor when I don't have enough money to take transportation. So I would like to see services, the service hubs come available so seniors don't have to spend their time worrying. Let's create preventions, not interventions. There's too much intervention, but we can stop it. Prevention is the first source, or the first doors to open, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. And I'm assuming any comments from you as the last but not least?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I heard while with the thing, what seniors really need, yes, you have people who want to work, but they need people who cares. It doesn't matter, you could get anybody to come and see them, but they have to care, because if they don't care, if they only care about the paycheck, then the senior is not going to get the care that they really need. So if you're going to put when this in place, this is some of the things I hear they wanted. Care. People who care. Because if I don't care, then I'm just going there for my paycheck. So these are things that people really want to see. Caring. People who care about loving their seniors and taking care of them and making sure they get the care that they really need. And there are need out there. And as she said, we shouldn't be here talking about this for seniors. Seniors come to this country or who live here or who born here and they work all these years. Things should be in place already waiting for them. Are waiting for me because, you know, I'm getting there too. So I need that care that I supposed to get and not supposed to be, you know, asking and begging and going around. So, Mr. Mayor, please, and when you put this in place, if it could be in place for another 20 years, not just for the short-term thing. This should be a long-term thing for the seniors, not a short-term something, Mr. Mayor. Please, and all these counselors within your area, there are seniors in all of you guys' areas. You should also look within and making sure seniors get all these things that they need and within your area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Deere, very much. And you did well. 4 times 3 is 12, and we're at 12 minutes and 6 seconds. That's very good. Are there any questions of these deputies? I think you made a very complete presentation, and we really appreciate the input on this very important item. So thank you all very much, the 4 of you.
Thank you, sir.
We have one more to be heard that has joined us, and just while may I just take the opportunity to recognize, because we don't have visits very often from former mayors, but our former mayor, David Crombie, is here. And so hello, David, and welcome. Your matter is still not going to be dealt with till after lunch, even though you're a former mayor. But having said all that, we're thrilled that you're here. And that matter is coming up right after lunch. Emily.
Point of order.
Oh, she's not here.
Mr. Mayor.
All right. No, that does bring us to the end of the deputations then on seniors housing
Mr. Mayor,
item.
just a point of order.
I'm sorry, Michael.
I wanted also to recognize that the Honourable Pauline Browse from Scarborough is here with us as well. Someone that myself and I know Councillor
Bless you.
Someone that I know myself and Councillor de Bearmaker have looked up to, someone who has been a great, and Councillor Ainsley has been a real
and
leader.
Mayor Tory.
And the Mayor Tory has been a real leader in Scarborough. It is always an honor and a pleasure to not only be in the same space with her, but just to be able to greet her and certainly to acknowledge the former mayor as well. But I wanted just to say what an honor it is to even just be in the same room with Pauline on a regular basis. It doesn't happen enough, and I'm very humbled to see you here, Ms. Browse. Thank you.
I would have said the same earlier when I saw, but I saw Mayor Crombie come in, and my eyesight is so bad that I couldn't see Miss Browse there. But now that you've brought her to my attention, I can see that it's her, sort of. But welcome, Pauline. Nice to have you here. Okay. That brings us to questions of staff on the Tenants First report. Are there questions of staff? Councillor Fletcher.
Yes. It shows there's 13,000 units, and that was from the former Metro Toronto Housing. I don't know who's answering these questions, Mr. Mayor.
Through the chair, there are 14,000 existing units in the 83 seniors buildings. I don't have the number of senior units prior to amalgamation.
Well, it seems that, but that is from that corporation, Metro Toronto Housing. Do you know how many units there are in the portfolio from the old city home?
In the seniors portfolio,
No, in the whole portfolio. These are probably too complicated. I'll ask these, I'll get this information from you. So I have that breakdown for Ontario Housing.
we can get that breakdown.
Yeah, that'd be great. So, but currently, the seniors housing since 2008 has actually been managed in a quasi-seniors unit, starting with operating unit managers and the city divided in half. And it's been operated in tangent with the single-family homes. Is that not how
That's
it's
my
being
understanding,
operated
Councillor.
right now? So basically, TCHC, as it stands, has operated seniors housing as separate units outside of the regular housing operations.
And the recommendations before committee are to further that, further centralize the operation of the 14,000 seniors units through one structure reporting directly to the president CEO.
Now, in the original Tenants First, it was suggested, correct me if I'm wrong, that we look at bringing the single-family homes out, which are, I'll call them a specialty management, and put those for an RFP, which has happened. So those who manage that type of housing right now will have a chance to bid on managing that separately. Was that not also the suggestion for the seniors housing, that that's seen not as the kind of core business of TCHC, and a separate unit would be created, and then it would come under another auspices other than TCHC? I don't see that listed in this report.
The key, through the chair, the key difference in the previous Tenants First report, the standalone housing and the direction that we are now implementing is to look for nonprofit providers who will be able to provide better service. With respect to the seniors component, the suggestion was if there was any movement, and it's not clear, there is no hard recommendation before committee on that, it would be closer to the city, not further from the city.
But I don't see that as part of this direction, and even as a forecast, it doesn't exist here, which is concerning.
There are references in the report to that, and the graphics that we've provided in the report also illustrate that. At this point, further due diligence is required before we're in a position to provide specific advice to council with respect to actually moving 14,000 units.
Correct, but is that not still the position or the forecast or the sought-after outcome at the end of the day? So this is kind of an interim step, or is it the end?
It is not the end. It is an interim step, but ultimately to what? We don't have the information to provide advice to council. So page 13 of the report provides the continuum of potential outcomes. The report is recommending we do the necessary due diligence, we secure the resources required to do that, to provide that advice to council.
Thank you.
That was your final question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. All right, then. Members of the committee wishing to ask questions of staff. Councillor, Deputy Mayor Holliday and Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff. Can someone talk to me a little bit about it came up today in the speakers, I should note, about access to transit, in particular layers such as Wheel-Trans and community bus. Can someone talk to me about how the interface works between the new housing unit or the interim organization and service planning with Toronto Transit Commission, especially towards those types of services that are more likely to be serving seniors?
Through the chair, transit and accessibility will be one of the elements that we look at. However, at this moment, we have prioritized work with the local health integration network to ensure that we have those critical health and support services co-located in a new model. The transportation and certainly transportation programs through seniors agencies will be a component of the model.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holiday. Councillor Ainsley, Deputy Mayor Holiday. Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. I was just looking in attachment number 2, the list of buildings that were at one time seniors buildings and then they became mixed buildings. When was that? When did that transition happen?
It actually happened at different points for different buildings and had to do with availability of units and demand.
But did that start at amalgamation or?
It would have been subsequent to that.
And do you know when it stopped or when it all? Was there a time period when they were unmixed? They were created mixed buildings. They started like 1998 and.
So there were certain buildings at the point of amalgamation of the housing companies that had been seniors only that became mixed buildings. That happened at different points since that time for different buildings.
Okay, and then at the bottom of attachment 2, it totals those buildings. They total 5,294 apartments. Do you know what the number is of anticipated seniors that would be looking for senior-only housing?
Through the pre-work leading up to the new housing plan, we're actually doing that kind of market study to understand what the demographics of demand will be across the housing system. We don't have that data yet. We're working on it.
So one of the recommendations in this is that staff are supposed to come back in 2020. So are you anticipating you're going to come back in 2020 and say, we need to transition this many buildings from mixed residence to seniors housing?
In fact, through the chair, in fact, the analysis would be broader than that. We would be looking at demand generally, what parts of town, what areas that demand is in, the availability of senior services in proximity to buildings, and identifying which buildings will best serve that population. It may not be the buildings that were historically seniors only. So that's not the basis that staff are looking at it from. Rather, it will be where is the demand, where are the best services, what does that picture look like?
Okay, and is that going to be looked at within a geographic area? Because now I have seniors that are looking at buildings and they don't have the services, and they're on a, like, to go from a one building apartment to a one building apartment for a senior in TCHC, like the waiting list is huge.
Through the chair, absolutely. We'll be looking at it on a local geographic basis.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mayor Tory.
Thank you, Councillor Ainsley. Other questions of staff from Councillor DeGiorgio and Deputy Mayor Bilo as well? Did I see your hand moving there? No? Yes, no? Okay. All right, thanks. Deputy, at least to Councillor DeGiorgio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Brillinger, just the Commissioner of Housing Equity is currently under the umbrella of TCHC, and I understand now if we're going to be breaking out the seniors, and in particular vulnerable seniors, into a separate entity, what will happen to her function? Has any thought or consideration been given to what happens to her function? Does she move to this new entity, or does she remain under the TCHC umbrella?
Through the chair, the report is recommending that the Office of the Housing Commissioner be within scope. Regardless of changes at TCHC, we need to review the mandate of the Office of the Housing Commissioner to see if that role should exist system-wide. In other words, addressing all social housing units, not just those managed by TCHC.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeGiorgio. Are there other questions? Councillor Fragedakis.
To speak.
Oh, to speak, sure. We're just going to see about questions first, Councillor Pasternak. Then we'll yeah.
Just very quickly, clarity on mixed buildings. Are they in this portfolio that we're approving today?
No, because the focus is on the 14,000 units in the 83 standalone or seniors-only buildings. That is the first focus.
Yeah. So some say that it's actually healthier for seniors to be in mixed buildings. Would you concur with that view?
The intergenerational benefits have been well researched and advocated. I think the issues that we were hearing from the deputants is when there are residents who are not seniors, who don't have appropriate supports for their tenancies to be successful, whether that's mental health supports or other health supports, issues arise, and that's the issue that we'll be looking to address through the model development, to make sure that people have appropriate supports.
Some cities even place university students in bachelor apartments within seniors buildings. Is that something that's been explored, or is that part of the model, or really not on the table?
It is being explored, and in fact, at the last council meeting, council authorized the city to receive funding to look at setting up a home sharing program. That's looking at older homeowners and university students as tenants. So we are actively looking at those opportunities.
All right, just very quickly, to follow up to the earlier motion about the Office of the Commissioner of Housing Equity, in the footnote on page 12, it seems as if staff doesn't have a position on whether it would be located within this seniors housing portfolio. Is there doubt about its efficacy or its role that it could play?
Through the chair, not at all, and it is one of the things we would want to review and determine whether or not it should belong in the new housing services.
So that's a discussion for a future time.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pasternak. Other questions of staff? Okay. Now, just I can just see how we're doing here. I know Councillor Fragedakis is going to be first to speak. How many are wishing to speak from the Executive Committee? Okay. Oh, and Councillor Fletcher as well. All right. Well, we won't finish this before lunch. What we can do is get started on the speeches, and perhaps Councillor Fragedakis, you could go first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate you allowing me to speak just 5 minutes before your break for lunch. And I hate to stand between everyone and food.
You only have 3 minutes.
Okay,
You'd pass the limit of 3 minutes.
Oh, I didn't realize. Okay, well, I won't take very much time. I'm actually here to speak in support of the recommendations that are before us. I think this is an important step that we're taking, and I had only come to ask for a minor amendment to recommendation 1A that we include consideration of a pilot project at Greenwood Towers in the TCHC portfolio at 145 Strathmore Boulevard, as well as other strategic locations. And the reason I come to ask that this building be included is we've had 2 tragic fatalities in the last 6 months at this particular building, death by fire, and we have in this building the largest concentration of 80-year-olds plus in this building, which is the largest concentration in any of the TCHC properties, and we also have a very significant 70-plus-year-old population. So we actually have a situation where we have elderly people who are vulnerable, who also have a series of health complications and other issues that are complicating their existence, and they don't have the proper supports. And what I'm hoping for, and what we've been working with other agencies are, and trying to work with the LIN to try to get some appropriate funding to actually have programs in place in this building to actually work with the seniors. I know that Loft has come in and they're working with, they've told me, with 12 people, but they could easily be working with an additional 65 people because the issues are so complicated. So any support that you could give and any consideration you could give in light of what's happened at this building over the last 6 months would be greatly appreciated. And I know the Deputy Fire Chief is here and he could speak to any of you if you had any questions about what's happened here at that property, as well as Ms. Milsom, who I thought was here but maybe has gone off for lunch.
Thank you, Councillor. And as you know, I'll move that amendment on your behalf when the time comes to do so. I can't see, it's far enough to see the clock. It says what, 12:26? Is it 12:26? 12:26. All right, we have time for one more speaker, which would be Councillor Fletcher before lunch. And then, did you have, there was no motion, so Councillor Fletcher's next.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to be supporting this, but I'm going to be asking for it to be a little bit clearer. That the way I read these recommendations, and I won't do this here, I'll get this fixed up for council, is that this to me gives me no indication that this is an interim step in the recommendations. And I want to speak very strongly for this being an interim step. I happen to be on the board of Toronto Community Housing when Al Gosling died, and was there on the board when the management model was essentially changed to be 2 large areas covering all of the seniors' housing in Toronto Community Housing. So we really actually have had a standalone seniors model since 2008. That's 10 years. And yet the Tenants First indicated that we need to be much clearer, and it needs to be somebody's core business. When I talk about core business for Toronto Community Housing, I don't talk about the single-family homes. We're managing those in a different way. Those may have been much closer to the core business of City Home, one of the predecessor corporations. And for core business, I don't talk about seniors' homes, because that really was the core business of Metro Toronto Housing Corporation. But the core business of Toronto Community Housing, I believe, are those many, many units, the ones that are under redevelopment often, the ones where we are plagued with different problems, the ones where people need jobs, they need help, they need community development, they need to get on with a better life. That should be the core business of Toronto Community Housing. So I believe strongly that starting to isolate this even further as a seniors portfolio, and then having it managed discreetly rather than off the side of the desk or the seniors are over there, as I've witnessed. Not that they're mistreated in any way, but it's not the core business. There is nobody who's thinking all the time, every day, about the seniors. And we know, as we've heard from many of our fantastic deputants, that it's a growing population, and we are going to have to think a little bit more clearly. Now, somebody asked where that list came from that became mixed. Those buildings became mixed when streets to homes were moved into seniors' buildings, where people were moved off the street into seniors' buildings when the Streets to Home program started. I think we should find out how successful that's been for the seniors. May have been successful for those who came off the street, but we often have heard that there wasn't enough attention paid in those buildings to the needs of seniors once we were moving vulnerable population of a different type into the buildings. And so I think this is part of a long trajectory in looking how to manage a corporation that had everything thrown into one basket, told to go out and provide for tenants. And we found after how many years, 16 years, 17 years, that we need to make some, not just tweaks, we need to make some major changes, and I think this is one of them. So I will be proposing something at Council, Mr. Mayor, that makes it much clearer. This is moving somewhere. It's not staying within this larger corporation, in my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. All right, so just so people know what's roughly going to happen, we have some speakers from Executive Committee to hear from, and then the question to be put on this, and then there's quite a long item on the waterfront that comes up next. And then, just for you, Miguel, your item probably won't be heard because the Scarborough waterfront item is quite long, probably till 4 o'clock if you wanted to do anything. Okay. Just because you asked me so nicely this morning, I thought I'd let you know. So we will now adjourn until 1:30. Thank you very much.